Okay, this meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission for June 5th, 2024 will come to order. Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Roll call, please, Lori.
Chairman Richardson,
Here.
Vice Chairman Aton.
Here.
Secretary Grant,
Here.
Member Childs,
Here.
Member Garrod,
Here.
Member Faison,
Here.
Member Moscoso,
Here.
Alternate Member Findler,
Here.
Alternate Member Rogers.
Here.
School Board Member McLaughlin.
Here.
We've got a full board here tonight, so we do have a quorum. Next item is approval of minutes of May 22nd, 2024. They're in your packet. Any corrections or deletions to make to the minutes? Member Grant, Secretary Grant?
Thank you, sir. I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes for May 22nd.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Vice Chairman Aton. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Chelsea, would you read the quasi-judicial confirmation procedures?
Yes, sir. The notice on the agenda provides that all persons who anticipate speaking on any public hearing item must fill out an oath card to be heard on that agenda item and sign the oath contained thereon. These cards are located on the table near the entrance to the council chamber or may be obtained from the recording secretary. This meeting will be conducted in accordance to the procedures adopted in Resolution Number 24-1997. Those speaking in favor of a request will be heard first, those opposed will be heard second, and those who wish to make a public comment on the item will speak third. The applicant may make a brief rebuttal if necessary. A representative from either side, for or against, may cross-examine a witness. Anyone who speaks is considered a witness. If you have photographs, sketches, or documents that you desire for the commission to consider, they must be submitted into evidence and will be retained by the city. Please submit such exhibits to the recording secretary.
Thank you. There is no consent agenda. There's no old business. New business. Item A. Brad?
Item 9A on your packet begins on page 11. This is an application for a conditional use permit in the downtown mixed-use zoning district. Property is located at 1210 South Hopkins Avenue. The applicant is requesting a conditional use permit to operate a vehicle for hire establishment at this location. The future land use designation of the property is downtown mixed use, and the property is zoned in the Midtown subdistrict in the downtown mixed use zoning district. The definition of vehicle for hire establishments is where vehicles for hire are stored and maintained. These establishments may include administrative and dispatch offices and areas for vehicle repair and maintenance. This is from the code. This will be on the City Council's agenda on June 11th. Our staff report begins on page 13. The surrounding land uses and zoning on the property are also downtown mixed use, specifically in the Midtown subdistrict, with the exception of the FEC Railroad immediately to the west of the property, and west of that area is zoned single-family high-density residential, high-density, which is an R1C zoning district. On page 14 of your packet, I'm just going to summarize the analysis here. According to the Brevard County Property Appraiser's Office data, the existing two buildings on the property were originally constructed in 1962 and 1966, and the use is described as a garage, auto body, auto paint shop. A business tax receipt for an electrical contractor was issued for Unit A, and there are two units, Unit A and B, and remains active on the property. BTR has not previously been issued for Unit B, which is where the business will be working out of. That's proposed here tonight. The property does not have a current business tax receipt. Future land use designation on the property again is downtown mixed use with the Midtown subdistrict. Property is not an area of critical concern. The paragraph to the bottom there, where it starts with the downtown mixed use smart code, chapter 28, article 3 of the code, describes Midtown subdistrict. Some of you may recall that the downtown mixed use zoning district includes the CRA, and within there are 4 or 5 sub-districts that operate like sub-zoning districts, basically. In this area, it's specifically zoned Midtown, and it's described as having an area of heavier commercial fabric with larger lot uses and development such as vehicle sales, auto repair sales, some industrial uses, and scattered residential uses. The immediate area around the subject parcel is consistent with this description, composed of single-family residential uses to the west and south of the subject property, offices, and auto body repair shops. We provided to you our analysis of the conditional use criteria, starting on page 15 of your packet. We believe the zoning and the proposed use is consistent with the code and the comprehensive plan. We do believe that consistent with future land use element policy 1.8.5, which is on page 15 of your packet, we believe that there is a need to mitigate visual impacts of any vehicle storage areas, and staff will recommend that a solid opaque fence be made of material other than chain link fence on the property. Further down on page 16 of your packet, we've responded to the criteria related to ingress and egress. We believe that is sufficient. They meet that. Also nuisance factors. We do not believe there's going to be we stated here that noise during overnight hours is anticipated while loading and unloading vehicles. However, the existing vegetation on the site is likely to help mitigate this nuisance. The anticipated noise levels can be considered compatible with the surrounding area because, again, as described earlier, it's more or less of a vehicle concentration area. Page 17 of your packet. Again, we state to mitigate visual impacts of any vehicle storage areas, we will request that there be a condition of an opaque fence or solid wall material other than chain link fence. We believe it meets the adopted level of service standards. Screening and buffering will be addressed during a site plan or permit review, whatever is necessary at the time of development or occupancy of the property through the business tax receipt. Through that process, we'll determine what kind of specific permitting process they'll need to go to. And if they need to replace fences or put up new fences, that will be addressed at that time with a permit. If they decide to propose a high security fence, there's specific criteria for that as well, including landscaping. We did not feel the need that there was a need for us to propose a condition of operating hours. We are recommending on page 18 of your packet that approval of this conditional use permit application with the following condition, that a solid opaque fence made of material other than chain link, i.e. wood, vinyl, etc., shall be provided around the perimeter of any designated vehicle storage areas. The applicant submitted a concept plan on page 19 of your packet. It shows the existing conditions on the property and where they proposed to put this vehicle storage area. It doesn't show where there are existing chain link fences, and wherever they propose the vehicle storage areas, that condition would apply. It would have to be enclosed with some kind of opaque screening. There's an aerial on page 26 of your packet. You can see how the property is laid out. Unfortunately, the parcel boundaries are not correctly overlaid onto the aerial, so it kind of looks like it's tilted a little bit there. With that, I'll try and answer any questions you have.
Secretary Grant.
Mr. Parrish, on page 17, number 8, in the staff comments, you talk about that the unpaved area of the west of the existing buildings appear to be most likely the parking area. And you go on to say that they should be, let me see here, designed to and constructed to ensure soil and water contamination does not occur in the area to be utilized for outdoor storage. Should this be a condition also?
If you believe it should be, it can. When they come in and decide to put in through the site plan or permitting process, they designate an area where vehicle storage is going to be located. Our code is already going to require some kind of stabilized surface.
Well,
So at that,
you're the expert, sir. I mean, should it be a condition or not?
we didn't feel it was necessary to make it a condition since our code would require something of those lines anyway.
Okay, thank you.
Member Moscoso.
Yeah, my question was very similar. If it is required in our code, how can we be assured that that's happening? Does code enforcement go out and check? Because I think that's a big concern of mine as well.
So we have not determined what kind of processing to go through as far as a permit. I suspect they're going to have to go through a site plan process, whether we consider that to be, according to our code, a class 1 or a class 2. And any proposal they're going to give to us when they, all this will be caught when they submit to us their request for a business tax receipt, their occupational license. It'll be reviewed by our standard staff site review team, and they'll determine as to what process they'll necessarily have to go through. But our code already requires that a parking storage area has to have a stabilized service.
And also, I mean, since they're requesting a CUP, did we get any feedback from the community about, because I know there's what appears to be a single-family home right next to it. Was there any feedback that came in?
We did not receive anything.
Okay, thank you.
Member Garad.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Parrish, I've got a couple of questions on the illustration that's the photograph from the property tax rolls and then the site plan that was on page 19. The two buildings are on the parcel. Are they owned by the property owner and then the lease to each two different businesses that are there? Or is it one business and the vehicle for hire is the single business that'll be taking place on the land?
Well, Unit A apparently has a BTR for business there already, so this applicant is requesting to occupy the building for where Unit B is, and then utilize a portion of the property for a vehicle for hire. So there's no prohibition on that, so it can be allowed.
So in case there's any conditions, it's applying against the land and ownership by the property owner, which would be containing the two buildings.
Yes.
The second question, and I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with the city's code on garbage enclosures. Having the dumpster, which is visible from the street, doesn't seem to be in keeping with the idea of that part of the downtown area and certainly community redevelopment area. That being said, that's the other building, the building that would be to the north. Relocating the dumpster may not be practical, but would the code require the dumpster to be in an enclosure?
That could be a condition that you may recommend.
Or relocating the dumpster? I don't know the tolerance, the distance between the buildings. Maybe the applicant can answer that question as to whether it's going to impede the garbage truck from driving to the back, which would be a more appropriate area for the dumpster, so you wouldn't have to see it from the street front. And then the other question relates to the improvements if the vehicle for hire business is going to occupy the back of the property. The site plan on page 19 illustrates the 6-foot chain link fence, and I think it calls for barbed wire on the top of that for security when you refer to it as a security fencing. Is barbed wire a preferred security measure when you're in this downtown area subject to the CRA?
It is permitted.
Thank you.
Vice Chairman Aton.
Looking at the sketch on 19, is the intention the access to the back area between the two buildings, where it says 6-foot chain link gate?
It would appear so, yes, sir.
Okay, and then I actually kind of grew up in this business, so I've got a little bit of background. What's the city's rules on? So I'm assuming this is vehicles. If a vehicle's broken down, it'll be towed and then stored here overnight, and so I guess at that. What are the rules as to how long it can be in storage before this becomes a junkyard, effectively?
You would have to operate as identified in the permit. So if it looks like a junkyard, it'll be, we will be reaching out to the property owner and working with them on through code enforcement.
Okay, and then the same thing on, I guess, certainly during operating hours, but even more importantly, after hours, is how do you handle, or how does the ordinance handle vehicles in front of the property visible from the street? If they're towing something in, can they stage them, drop them, transfer them out in front? Or is it some kind of requirement that they're immediately taken into the opaque fenced area versus eyesore on going down Hopkins?
I understand what you're saying. It's as they're processing a vehicle for intake, obviously it'd probably be out front or somewhere there visible at some point in time. I think the question is if it's there for a lengthy amount of time, that would be violation of the CUP because that wouldn't be in the designated vehicle storage area, I would imagine, unless they've identified it to be that way. But they don't have to meet the other, if that's true, it would have to meet the enclosure conditions as well if this is approved the way we proposed.
Final question, again, because of background. We had a very similar business in Indiana, and we had a security dog. You could call it a junkyard dog. How's the ordinance deal with that, if it does at all?
Having a security dog on,
For security?
I've never come across that question, but I'd imagine they'd be allowed to have one. There's have to meet, the Code of Ordinances does have regulations related to animals. So it would have to be consistent with that.
Yeah, again, to Member Moscoso's question, if the residence next door, it seems to be an issue, could be an issue. Do we know if that residence is occupied or not?
I do not know.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, I have a question. On page 26, the aerial photo shows the veterinary hospital, the line going through the middle of that veterinary hospital.
The property appraiser's site registration is not ready yet. We haven't spent a lot of time.
Do we know where the property line is?
The best information we have is the survey that was provided by the applicant on page 19. So the property appraiser layer is always skewed. We try to rectify it as best we can, but because these lots are so small, the deviation is pretty obvious.
Any other questions of the staff? And we'll hear from the applicant first.
Good evening. I did bring a USB with some pictures and video. I'm not sure if anybody wants to have that up there, but as I talk through it, it'll say that I have photos of that thing.
Would you
So-
state your name and address for the record?
My name is Rose Smith, and my address is 2515 White Oak Lane here in Titusville. I'm here to discuss the planning and zoning analysis and findings for our vehicle for hire conditional use application. I have thoroughly reviewed the report and appreciate the skilled work involved. It seems comprehensive with no detail overlooked. The planning department staff report concludes with the recommendation to replace the current .63 perimeter security fencing with solid material such as wood and vinyl. While aesthetically pleasing in some contexts, this property is not visible to the public as others on the same street, which was a key factor in our choosing this location. The entire storage lot sits back from Hopkins Avenue behind two buildings out of plain sight. Additionally, the south side of the building is screened by over approximately 0.3 acres of brush, shrubs, large trees, and a chain link fence that already existed. The north side features a chain link fence with heavy black fabric and visible areas adjoining the neighbor's business's back lot, which has no public use. Right now, the veterinary clinic uses that to let the dogs go to the restroom. There's no public parking or public usage to that side. The southeast side, where the storage yard entrance is located, is hidden behind 1210 South Hopkins Unit A, which is currently occupied by Advent Electric. The always locked gate entrance is only visible if one walks back there, as is not easily seen from the sidewalk or street, and is still obscured view as the gates and side fencing are covered in thick, heavy-duty black fabric at this time. The west side of the property borders an active railroad, beyond which is residential property obscured by thick vegetation. We cannot see the homes from our lot, and they cannot see into our yard without removing that vegetation. We've driven by that street and looked through, and they can't see us. I don't even know how close a home is by looking from our yard. Consequently, we haven't added opaque fabric back there because of the vegetation, but if we were requested to do so, we could add it there as well. There's also a breezeway between A and B, which was mentioned before. That would not be the main entrance to the back. That's actually locked with two gates. There's a gate in the front and then again in the back to the lot, because there is an office door on the right side of Unit B. We would need to get into that office door. So we've locked it twice, and the back side has black opaque fabric. But that is not something that you would want to drive vehicles or tow trucks through there at all. The main entrance is on the south side of Unit A. It goes alongside the buildings. I'm so sorry, 2 locked gates to secure the yard, making it invisible and accessible. And I have video, again, a video of a walk-by of this and a drive-by of what it would look like if you were to go by it. While conducting research, we also spoke with Jay LaCourte of Ellis Properties, which owns the property, the 2 homes that are situated to the south side, 1214 and 1218 South Hopkins, that shares the south fence line with the proposed storage lot. He informed us that although the property looks like a house, it is no longer eligible as a single-family home or for rent as a dwelling. It has been vacant for a long period of time and is only permitted to be a commercial office. To have residents again, it would need to be demolished and rebuilt as a multi-unit complex. Single-family homes are not allowed to go back onto that property. I don't know all the codes, but as a realtor, he did share that with me. Since no one is or would be residing there as a family home, the limited view of the fencing at the entrance to the yard would not seemingly be an issue for potential commercial occupants. Mr. LaCourte mentioned that he is having difficulty selling the property and has actually taken it off taken off the market due to a lack of potential buyers. It appears the property has been occupied for almost 2 years. Our neighbor to the north, which we mentioned before, I heard you guys mention before, the veterinary clinic, has approached us and expressed her approval of the property's current state. She is pleased with the improvements we've made, including the addition of the opaque fabric along the shared fence line, the landscaping maintenance, and the enhanced security and lighting that we've done to the building. So in lieu of a dog, we've actually set up a whole bunch of solar cameras around the property and solar motion lights. We would not be bringing an animal onto the property. Our neighbor, refencing the entire property with wood, vinyl, or another solid material would not be practical and would be costly to construct and maintain for a tow yard. Nor do we know if it would please the neighboring property owners and they would want to share it, or if they would want to share in the cost of redoing the shared fence lines. Chain link fencing is strong and harder to climb or drive through, making it ideal for our needs. Chain link is durable and meets the requirements for a secure privacy barrier with fabric applied. Wood and vinyl up against the vast vegetation that we do not have the right-of-way to would be hard to maintain, especially with vines and very large old trees. In no time, it would be in disarray even with the best of maintenance. The black fabric is applied in 50-foot sections and can be replaced easily and cost-effectively. Also, with the wood and vinyl, if backed into by accident by a vehicle or tow equipment, has no room for give. It would buckle, unlike the chain link, which would bounce back when pushed under pressure. Again, I brought up photos regarding what a pressure-treated wood fence would look like in a commercial use and vinyl fencing. Other tow yards in the area use chain link fencing and to our knowledge have not been required to switch to solid fencing. For instance, a tow company on US 1 near 50, a major thoroughfare frequented by tourists, uses chain link fencing and was without fabric, so the storage of vehicles is fully visible to visitors and the community alike. Likewise, automotive repair shops nearby, which also store cars in various conditions, working or not, full of dust or not, or broken windshields or not, use chain link fencing. It is the most suitable material for our type of businesses. The property has been zoned auto repair, garage, and auto body work for many years with vehicle storage in the back with its current fencing, which we would like to add was in disrepair before we made the needed repairs and added the heavy-duty black fabric for privacy. Chain link with opaque fabric is also what is preferred and approved by Titusville PD for police rotation service, which we have been invited to apply. In conclusion, we're very grateful for the opportunity to speak tonight and do business in Titusville, our hometown for 12 years now. I ask Planning and Zoning, the Downtown Community Redevelopment Agency, and City Council to please approve this conditional use permit without the requirement to change the security fencing. Thank you so much. And I do, if I could address some of your questions, I wrote them down while you were speaking.
I have a question for you. So Advent Electric is not moving out. So would there be a building for your use?
There's a Unit A and a Unit B. There's two separate buildings. We would be using Unit B. They use Unit A. And right behind their building, they have a concrete pad that they store like the Advent Electric van there.
Member Faison.
So Brad, she brings up a really good point. Along that area there, no other businesses have opaque fencing. And all of them have chain link fencing in that area. I did not know, ma'am, that you're gonna be storing them behind the building, so thank you for answering that question. But asking for something that's inconsistent with that area, I think chain link fencing would be kind of appropriate. What do you think?
You're asking me what I think about chain link fencing?
Chain link fencing in that area, since along that whole thoroughfare, there are a lot of other businesses that have cars that are outside that have chain link fencing that does not have any kind of opaqueness to it. And if she's gonna do something similar to them, storing vehicles, having vehicles, would not be consistent with the other businesses in the area?
Well, we didn't evaluate the existing other properties to see what's going on there, and each of those properties probably have a different use that's not similar to this or exactly what's being requested here. So we didn't do that kind of analysis. What we did do is see, based on what the use is being proposed through this conditional use permit, does allow us to be able to ask for additional conditions that we think to help mitigate potential impacts to the neighborhood. We looked at it as a visual impact, and that's why we recommend a solid opaque fence. We believe that chain link fence with fabric on it is tears, becomes a maintenance issue, and it's unsightly.
Okay.
Well, I'll just add at this point, if you look down the street, what used to be many, many years ago, the Chance Pontiac Olds dealership has a chain link fence, and the European car repair place next to it has a chain link fence, and across the street, what used to be the rental car, which is now owned by, I don't know, whoever took over Ron Norris. Starling, yeah, has a chain link fence. So chain link fence is in that area. Member Garad.
A couple of questions for the applicant's representative. I mentioned earlier the question regarding the garbage disposal. And the underlying theme that my question stemmed from is this is within the community redevelopment area. So focus on redevelopment of an improvement as opposed to perpetuation of unsightly conditions is something that's kind of near and dear to my questions. The ownership of the property is the responsible party. You as a tenant would be the secondary and other responsible party, and both parties are held responsible.
Yes, sir.
So if a condition of approval is required, I would imagine that the due process of some pending future, if applicable, code enforcement is going to go out to both the lease tenant owner, your occupant, and the ownership of the property. So my question on the garbage disposal and the unsightliness of a dumpster on the thoroughfare is one that would be something I would hope you could take up with the owner if the condition is to require it to be relocated. It would seem like the unsightliness of cars in disrepair behind the buildings, you mentioned that that was one of your preferred locations, as it isn't visible from the street. I would leave the dumpster for that other business, A or B, which one it is, would also be considered unsightly and should be in the rear. I didn't see any distances on your survey sketch that show the separation between the buildings, but when I've driven by that many times, there is a clearance certainly big enough to take a tow truck with a disabled vehicle on through between those buildings. That's your entrance to the rear of the property, the west part of the property. Between the buildings?
No.
Is it in the photograph that's not aligned with the ownership? It is to the south of the two buildings? So that's an unpaved area.
It's
correct?
an unpaved area until you get beyond the fence line, and it's all millet after that.
Okay,
So
so-
that's, the whole back has been surfaced with millet.
Okay, so the deterioration caused by heavy truck traffic and routine truck traffic towing these cars could be expected to occur. So you would be comfortable if the condition of approval is to consider having an improved surface which would be impervious. I'm not sure about millet and concrete fines and other lifetime drainage conditions would probably warrant be paved in asphalt so that you can do some type of engineered plan to direct stormwater to a retention area. And back to my theme on redevelopment area, you would be comfortable if a condition would be that this become a paved surface area as opposed to impervious surface, including concrete fines or millet. And that would envision an improved driveway into the area in the back. And then for the storage of the vehicles, I would think that it would be fair to assume that that millet material would be sufficient for what you're doing with the vehicles you've got in different levels of disrepair. However, if it's pervious, any of the materials that could be coming off of a damaged vehicle, fluids, oils, and whatnot, are going to percolate straight into the ground. Therein is where paved surface materials are preferred because you can direct the stormwater to a retention area.
Correct. We do have 2 large concrete pads that are there that if we had a vehicle that was leaking, we would put them onto the concrete pads. That's a lot more affordable and feasible considering I don't own the property. The property owner is here. But to say that I would be comfortable paving, I don't think that I can make that decision for him if he would be comfortable paving the back. But I do have space for at least 4 cars that would be able to be off of that millet surface that could have oil pans under, the metal oil pans could be underneath it, and we could park those vehicles there. But in terms of the driveway, I'm sure that's something we could talk about with the owner in terms of paving it, so it's not a just dirt driveway up to the fence line. And then regarding the dumpster, I agree with you. I'd have liked the dumpster to be towards the back. When we contacted the city of Titusville, they said this was it because if you put it to the back, their trucks can't get back there easily and back up, and they weren't interested in putting it there. The other location it was at for years was in front of our building. They even have an outline of it, so right between the 2 bay doors was an ugly dumpster. So it was either right there in front of the shop or to the left where it locates now, or we don't get to have a dumpster. They will not go back further to pick it up, and they do it at like 4 a.m. They were not interested in us moving it somewhere else.
I understand your dilemma. However, the purpose of this, again, is that this is in my questions, this is in the community redevelopment area. So all due respect to the condition that they can't drive in the back or won't drive in the back, I can understand. But then that brings me back to creating an enclosure with doors so that the visibility is obscured. I have seen dumpsters included on new development sites around the city where, due to circumstances, they're located in the front, but they're obscured behind an enclosure. So a condition would be expected to be warranting that if you can't put it in the back because of the distance tolerances and closeness for a truck, leave it in the front, but you would be willing to talk to the owner about putting that in there.
Sure.
I'm going to also ask again, your idea of putting oil pans under a dripping car is admirable, but that's only that's only as likely as it may or may not happen. I couldn't even imagine having to send code enforcement out if you were to agree to put a pan under a dripping car, that they would have to observe the pan under the car. So that goes back to creating some type of drainage condition that moves that potential damaged vehicle's fluids from directly going into the ground or running off the concrete. That can be engineered. I'm sure someone can do that. How it's done would be in a site plan that would be, as Mr. Parrish mentioned, applicable to some point when you install the other improvements. And then the last question I have, and you mentioned that, and I appreciate the solar-powered lighting. Generally, directional lighting is on the building out to the yard because it's a more efficient way if cost is considered, because the building's already got electrical power. If you place lighting on the ground where you're installing poles so the lighting would shine into the building, it certainly keeps that vision of the lights from creating a nightscape for the residents, notwithstanding the trees and the vegetation in the way. Those residential homes could be illuminated in that kind of lighting that typically, it's called a wall pack. It's on the building face and it just goes out with a broadcast that's pretty obtrusive. So can you talk a little bit about your lighting that you have? Is it visible from the outside boundaries? Is it lumens? Is it high intensity? I understand the solar power. And
Right.
those are my questions. Thank you.
And they're motion sensor lights too, so they're not going to be on consistently. It's going to be when there's motion back there. And we've tested them. The train doesn't set it off. They're on the west side of the building. There's 2 of them there that face outward. So again, the 2 questionable residential houses, because again, they're not putting there's nobody living in there right now. It doesn't face that way. It faces back towards the yard, back to the railroad. And then there's some in the front, right by the bay doors that point down. If someone's walking in front of our shop, not only does our camera alert us from home, but those lights shine on them. But as soon as no one's walking there anymore, they're not operable. Where the veterinary clinic is, her next door, she's at a 2-story building. Our lights, if anything, she lives on the top. Our lights shine down towards the yard. None of it shines up towards her. And again, it would turn off as soon as something, went away. And I'm sure there's been raccoons in there by now. I'm sure other things, and nothing like that has set that off. They're designed to be humans and vehicles. You can change your sensitivity. And that's what we've done with those. And we have put one on a tree that's a little bit further back just to light up that back corner. And again, that's a big grassy area on one side, so the resident in the veterinary clinic wouldn't even see that. And the other side is 0.3 acres of brush, so it doesn't really shine into any window.
Or if I may, just to continue, you mentioned the key word there is downlighting. That's what you have currently installed?
It's up top, but then it faces down towards the
Right,
yard because the
that's-
building is taller than the yard. So it does face downward, not outward. We want to be able to see the vehicles when we're not there.
So you'd be comfortable if the condition would also implement a downlighting requirement so that you're not broadcast lighting to the
Of
other
course.
properties especially to the west?
Sure.
Thank you.
Vice Chairman Aton.
A couple questions. So there may be a happy medium on the fencing. Brad, like my building and business, we've got the slats in the chain link fence, creates an opaque fence, but yet the backing concern and some of those things are mitigated a little bit. Does that meet this requirement where it's not a wood or a vinyl, or?
We've dealt with that before, so yes, there's certain types of slats. We would recommend that if that's going to be the recommendation of the P&C, that those slats make an opaque fence.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's still fairly attractive and it maintains the flexibility. The driveway, because now that I understand that it's on that south side, the survey shows that's only 9 feet 4 wide.
Mm-hmm.
And that's grass now, or is it, what is
It's dirt.
It's just
It's
dirt.
dirt, and then where you're not driving out, of course, weeds have grown, and we're constantly spraying them down to try to keep it, but it's basically, it's dirt and coquina, I suppose, from going down so deep.
And Brad, is there any problem with the driveway being in the setback from an access on a commercial building like that? And 9 feet 4 with a tow truck and towing a car seems awfully tight.
I agree with you. It seems very tight. We would review that when they provide to us their BTR and just identify where their actual vehicle storage and access points are going to be, and we'll determine what requirements will be necessary, including stabilized surfaces for parking storage areas and for driveways.
That's all I had. Thank you.
Member Childs.
So you're advocating for the chain link fence, but I want to understand why do you prefer the chain link fence over the more opaque like slats and
So
stuff?
mainly the vast vegetation that's on the south side is one of the biggest problems, is I have no control over that 3 acres, and already right now it overhangs over it, and constantly I'm back there spraying for weeds, pulling the vines down. If you have vegetation and just a week later it's growing through, wood is not as conducive to be able to accept the vines growing through it as it's going to be chain link. I would constantly be replacing slats. And also the wood is not going to take the winds that come back there. Already we have chain link with this black fabric, and you see the winds come through that breezeway. Hurricanes and whatnot, the wood is just not as stable. And again, let's just say, and I'm not saying no one's perfect. What if one of my drivers accidentally backs one of the cars slightly into the fence? Wood is going to buckle under that. And the chain link is giving, it's going to pop right back. And also, let's say we have a customer that's not thrilled. They drive out of there really fast and they don't care there's a gate. I'm not going to pretend, and you may know, that's something that could happen in a towing industry. No one is ever happy with us 100% of the time, especially when we start doing police rotation. When they go to drive through, the fence is going to just fall down. Chain link is going to create some damage and hopefully create a thwarting, I guess is the word, a deterrent that they won't want to drive through it and climbing over it. It's not going to be as simple. If someone wants to climb, a gator or a person, they're going to do it no matter what the fencing is. But I promise you, in 3 years, and I've got a wood fence, they're not pretty after 2 to 3 years pressure treated. Vinyl's not pretty either, especially in a commercial use. Even just exhaust from cars is going to make that vinyl fencing look terrible. And again, against the vegetation, if you've ever seen a vinyl fence against vegetation, it's green in a few days. This would be asking me to do quite a lot of fence maintenance that I'm not saying is unnecessary. I'm saying I'm not a fence person, and I'd like to just tow cars and not maintain the
Yeah,
property
yeah.
all
What if
the
it was
time.
like vegetation and so in the places where you don't have vegetation growing, you could plant some vegetation. so
Definitely.
then-
I'd be a lot
Okay.
more conducive to maintain vegetation.
I think that would look better
Yeah.
in the long run anyway. And
Sure.
kind of one of our goals too is to look more natural too. So.
It is vegetated on each side, a little bit in the back where the railroad is. I could do a hedge all the way to the back, and that would actually now make each side completely vegetative
I
except
think
for
it
the
would
side
look
we
a
drive
lot
through.
better. Yeah. Thank you.
Member Garad.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You brought up the comment twice about police rotation. So during the disposition of a traffic investigation where a vehicle's been severely damaged, earlier the comment and the question and answer was about how long would a junk car make it a junk car as opposed to a wrecked car subject to being removed in a reasonable period of time. To me, that's very much supposition. If someone were to respond and say, we've got a complaint, we have 5 wrecked cars here and they haven't gone anywhere. However, under police rotation standards, if that vehicle's under an investigated period, it has to remain there. It doesn't get disposed of anywhere else during that time period, does it?
If I could address that, definitely. So when you have a wrecked vehicle and it is not in a crime scene investigation per se, it just happened in an accident, this is not a DUI, that's about 24 to 48 hours before a company called IAA or Copart wants that vehicle out of there. The insurance takes it out right away. In terms of the crime scene investigation cars, they have asked that we provide 3 spaces of interior storage for that. And we can do that. We have the building that is big enough to hold up to 6 cars inside of it. So
the-
crime scene cars could be inside the building.
Inside the building.
Inside the building until they were done with it. They ask for that. If, let's say this happened in the middle of the night, a DUI, someone passed away in that car, and they don't have the time to investigate it that night, they ask it to be brought back into the garage until they can send somebody out the next day. Once it's been cleared, and normally that is the next day, they don't just let this stuff, they don't want all the blood to, they don't want the evidence to not be as viable the next day or days after. So they come pretty quick and take care of that. Once it's cleared, then same thing. The insurance company will come and take the car.
So you would be comfortable with the commitment, as you've just described, if condition of approval, if that's where it ends up being, that those vehicles which are under an investigative criteria and on your police rotation would be stored interior to a building.
Definitely, it's why
That
we
would
picked
at
there.
least help the matter of long-term disposition of the vehicle during the investigation.
Exactly, and that's
Thank
why
you.
we picked this, is it had that ability. And then in terms of other cars that come in there, let's say we do a private property tow away, say Solomir Grand asks us to take a car out that's been abandoned there. We can only really have a car up there the very maximum amount of time for 30 days before I'm gonna lien it. I don't want it there. Once I lien it, then I can go ahead and get rid of it and dispose of it. I don't want a car more than 30 days. The only way that it would stay more than 30 days is after it was taken off of private property and it was a military official or a military member of the military. Then they would ask us to store it longer. And most of the time, those are viable cars. They're not just junk cars. We have car covers. We can protect it. But if someone has been taken away or they're out on service, then they can go ahead and, have the car. That would probably be the longest, but that's so rare. When someone's set up to be deployed, they make plans. But that would be the only one. The law depicts that we cannot do anything with the military person's car.
Member Rogers.
I was just going to mention, you were talking about sort of a compromise on the fencing. I've seen some fences that are vinyl coated. I'm sure we've all seen those. They're either green or a black or something like that. It softens a little bit and gives you a slightly different color. Maybe that would make people a little happier. Also, if somebody backs into it, it doesn't scratch the car quite so much. It's a little more expensive, of course. But.
A couple of questions. Have you figured out what is your capacity to store how many cars you can store in the back?
To be able to move the tow trucks around easily, we would probably have a maximum of about 25 cars there at the time, so we could also go in and turn around with the flatbed.
And your intention is to have those cars moved to other locations? I'm familiar with Copart, within 3 to 5 days?
That would be ideal, in fact, but most of them that we've dealt with in the past are there the very next day. They want their asset, and so it's basically 24 to 48 hours, those cars are gone. And that's in a rare situation. The cars that are gonna be back there will be short-term, but also, like I said, I want a revolving door. I don't, really want a lot of cars back there. I'm not making my money off of storage. There is a limit. You can only do $25 a day. This isn't the business that I'm in of storing cars. And to address, just since we're in the topic, none of them will be out front. There is no take-in process, nothing. Those cars come in, they go straight to the back. We have a 21-foot flatbed, and it fits on the side of the building, brings the cars back even when it's doubly loaded, and then we have a wrecker, and that would fit it back there as well.
And I take it, since you have made some improvements, before you received the CUP, are you in business?
No, that's why there's no business tax. Well, I'm in business, not there. I've been in business for 3 years with this company. We've been doing roadside mainly, and then we received tow trucks. 2.5 years into it, we started towing. We do not work out of that building. Again, I don't have the BTR for there. I have it for my residents at this time.
Any other questions? Mr. Fendler?
I had two questions. So I wanted to circle back. What was the apprehension with chain link fence with slats? What would be the issue?
Some of it is actually, if you look at the pictures, the veterinary office has slats for about 50 feet of it right now. For some reason, at some point, someone started to do the slats. That is very time-consuming to do. Insert a slat in every single one for the perimeter 0.63. It's not a cost, it's more just a time. The black fabric, if you see any of the pictures there, is very attractive. It looks really good, and it actually is a better barrier than the slats. You can still see through the slats. I'm happy to do it if that's what's asked of me, but we've put up brand new black fabric. What's also good about the fabric, it's very easy to replace. If it's ripped, go get another piece, cut the clips, and put a brand new piece on. It's very, very simple to do. But if I was required to do that, I would meet that requirement of the vinyl slats.
My other question was, so you mentioned, or barbed wire was brought up. Where would be the barbed wire be visible from, or would there be barbed wire?
So there's barbed wire there in some of the sections right now. It's in a little bit of disarray, and the reason that we left it that way when we moved on to that property in February is we weren't sure what they were going to ask of us. So before I made the repairs to the barbed wire that's in certain sections of it, we haven't done that yet. I would like to take it down. I don't necessarily want it there, but if it's a security issue and the city requires it, we'll go ahead and fix that barbed wire that's on the top of it. It's 6 feet without that. And then that looks like it's another like 12 inches, maybe 18 inches of barbed wire at an angle. There's some there, but it needs to be tightened and stretched and redone.
Brad, is that a security requirement that they would have to have barbed wire?
No.
Okay.
Mr. Rogers?
I think it bothers me a bit more, one comment, it bothers me a bit more the pervious surface than the view. But since she does have the pictures and we all seem to be so concerned about the view, is it difficult to put the pictures up so that we can see what it looks like from outside the building? Or would that, I mean, I'm just suggesting if nobody else is interested in that, that's fine. But I just thought, she said she had the pictures.
If she provided to us that flash drive, maybe before the meeting during regular hours or the day before, we would have been able to have a chance to scan it. Because she's bringing it now, we don't have that ability to do that, so we will not be able to plug that into our network.
Okay.
I can leave it if anyone needs it for any of the following hearings as well.
Member Moscoso?
Yeah, I think you've done a great job of presenting us with the information, and honestly, I'm okay with just the chain link fence. We had that in our backyard, and there was a lot of nice vegetation. You couldn't even see the fence. And then our neighbors, it belonged to them. They cut it all down and put a vinyl fence back there. And it looks just sterile. It looks horrible. We can't keep it clean. So I'm with you on that. I love the idea of natural vegetation being the buffer there. And it looks like behind the property, there's already, I don't know if you said 3 feet of vegetation as well.
There's a lot. There's some right there on the, I guess you call it the east side of the railroad tracks. And then the homes that are on the west side, there's another whole layer of vegetation. Really, the only one who can see into the area from the backside would be the conductor.
Member Garad?
Question to the applicant's representative. So the vehicle width you've got for a tow truck being able to pass the 9'4" illustrated on the plan is because the vehicle can't exceed 8 feet in width when it drives on the highways. So the vehicle's 8 feet wide, so you've got a little bit of room. But you're going to drive in and not be a circular exit through that driveway that's between the buildings.
No, that driveway between the buildings is completely locked. It's not going to be used at all. It doesn't need to be. Well, this driveway is perfect for that. In fact, I'd be more concerned because of the way the building's roofing is, that it may look like it's wide enough through the middle there, but you have a roof overhang. I really wouldn't want to drive my trucks through there. If I was required to, it will fit through there, but I have made that. We have repaired the fence that was there before with the black fabric that's in there. We've done repairs to it with new posts. There's a gate in the back, and there's a gate at the front of the building. And so right now, we've secured it off because, again, for police rotation, we have to keep this securely locked at all times. So we double locked how you would get into the office, and then each gate is locked again.
So the gates are lockable. They also open and close. It's just for your site management plan, you don't prefer that circular two-way, one in, one out
Yeah.
type. That brings another question. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Parrish. You mentioned that they'll have to present a plan where they're going to show compliance, conforming with some standard for driveways. The driveway that's there now, I'm not sure if it's anything more than dirt, and the code would require that to be impervious, some type of material, and it would have to be permitted to be developed in accordance with that, meaning they'd present a plan.
Driveways are required to have a stabilized surface, that I can say. So we would determine what specifically would be required once we receive that BTR, and well, that'll trigger as far as what type of development or permits would be required after that.
And the city's review of that plan is comprehensive to the extent where you've got a business with this picture, you've got a constrained area for emergency vehicle access in case of an emergency, and this 9-foot driveway sometimes has a truck park there. As you mentioned earlier, you've had it be there beside the building.
No, we don't park a truck there. It just goes by there.
Okay.
We don't park anything in that. In fact, there's signs on that gate that say this needs to be cleared 24 hours a day.
So in the case, Mr. Parrish, that this driveway would be improved, the 9 foot 4 inches would be improved with impervious material, that's going to be sufficient for intersecting the public street, that intersecting point being rigid to the extent it's not going to be deteriorated by consistent reuse of that driveway with vehicles by weight, certainly a tow truck with a car on the back of it. That's my principal concern with that access management, that it's just going to be a problem waiting to happen. Your code's going to require it to be paved at the driveway throat intersecting with Hopkins.
Yes.
It's not paved now, it's dirt.
It is paved now. There's 12 feet of pavement first, and then it goes into a very hard dirt surface.
From the roadway, it's
Yes.
paved back into the site.
Yep.
Okay.
The entrance or what you would consider, actually, the whole front is paved 12 feet.
Yeah, that's what thank you, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Cards, please. Lori?
Yanni Jusakos.
Good afternoon. My name is Yanni Jusakos. I'm the property owner. I live at 3400 South Crystal Lake Drive, Orlando, Florida. We bought this property a few years back. I don't know, you have questions for me? I mean,
Any
I'm gonna repeat
questions?
everything. She did a great job.
Mr. Garad?
You're the owner, as I brought up earlier, about the dumpster enclosure on building A or B, whichever that is, and securing that behind an enclosure with a door. You're comfortable with committing to that?
Absolutely. Whatever we need to do, we'll be happy to do.
And that the potential, as you develop through staff's permitting process, that you're going to have to potentially pave the driveway in some manner other than perhaps what the material composition is now, whether it's dirt or pebbles of limestone or whatever the material is, you would be comfortable if that became a requirement when the site plan gets reviewed by staff?
I would.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next card, please.
Chad Smith.
Good evening. My name is Chad Smith. My address is 2515 White Oak Lane. Hello, my name is Chad Smith. I'm here to represent I Go Now Towing and Recovery. I'd like to begin
Would you
by...
speak up, sir, and
Yeah.
move the microphone? Yeah.
How about
thank
like that? All right. I would like to begin by telling you a little bit about myself. I've been involved in the towing industry for over 25 years now. I also owned a previous business here in the beautiful city of Titusville for 7 years. I was the former owner of All Seasons Outdoor Maintenance. Throughout my 29 years of towing and recovering, I've been in many situations where I've had to save many lives. Often arriving before EMS, fire, or police can get there because of time traveled on roads. We come across accidents, things happen. Okay. This is not just a job for me. It's my lifestyle and a great passion to serve the residents of the wonderful city of Titusville. Whether it's during our happiest moments like our Touch a Truck events or our wonderful Christmas parades we have. I also see them at their toughest times when motor vehicle collisions and breakdowns needing a tow. I'm always more than pleased to be there to ensure their safety. Our family-run business aims to grow into what I hope will become an empire for our children, leaving a legacy behind that they can remember me by. We are proud to say that we have grown threefold over the last few years, but have reached the limits without the actual tow yard. And to add additional services, I have been requested to apply to be an approved Titusville PD rotation partner. By numerous officers, they always ask us why, how come you guys get here so quick and nobody else does? Have you applied to be PD? And I've talked with Chief Lau, and I have everything going in the right direction. At this property, we will have inside storage for crime scene vehicles, an option we don't believe that the tow company, other tow companies in the area actually offer at this time. We also centrally located to the police station, as well as some of the high traffic areas such as Garden Street, US 1, and South Street, and more. After operating mainly out of my house as a roadside company, we now have 2 tow trucks, 2 service vehicles, and need to expand to usable lot and office. As you may know, commercial real estate is really hard to find here in the city of Titusville. We found this property after 2 years of searching and would like to be ready to open our full doors as soon as possible. Since February, I've invested thousands of dollars in improvements to this property and this venture as well. By doing things the right way and applying for permits, we've shown patience, but we haven't been able to open our doors to operate at a full capacity. This has prevented me from generating the income needed to grow and hire more hardworking local staffs like ourselves. I know this board.
How many more minutes do you need?
I have like 2 sentences.
Okay, go ahead.
I know that this board and the council have dedicated themselves to developing an environmentally and promote local business. I hope that we can be a part of that success story. Thank you. I'm also here to answer any questions you have.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Next card, Lori.
Matt Berenger.
I believe you used to be on city council here. Now you're on city council in Cocoa.
I'm trying to steal a tow truck business. No, sorry. Good afternoon, Matt Berenger, 1016 Gray Road, Cocoa, Florida. I came to speak for a few reasons. Number one is that Mr. Smith and Mrs. Smith, 8 years ago when we had some young folks shooting each other up and a lot of violence in the community, we were having town halls over at Isaac Campbell. Chad was one of the first people to stand up and say, I'm fine, I'll get an internship for some kids that could be doing something else. One of the first. He is a man of the community. He's a good man. Rose is a great lady. They work hard and they do right, which is why they are here doing the process as it is meant to be done and not circumvent that. A couple things I would hope they would have an opportunity for. Number one, not go beyond the code. While I respect all of the questions and the concerns because they are really good to get to a better project, that building has been almost empty for 60 years. So from a redevelopment standpoint, you have somebody who is willing to occupy an unoccupied building for multiple decades. That is a win by itself, and they're doing it concurrent with businesses that are in the area. So it's conforming to the, I think, the intent of the area. So given empty building with nothing for another decade, or something that is similar to the properties that it surrounds, I think that that is a good option. The other part is on the fencing. Ultimately, I know my daughter, we have a golf cart, she backed the golf cart up, and when she backed it up, it didn't have something that gave. That was my lesson on something that gives for, you know, when mistakes happen. I think unique to the business and the conforming, the uniqueness of the lot, the rationale for a chain link seems very reasonable, and I would think if we have a TPD car in there getting towed, if it bumps up and back, do you want it to bump into a chain link or do you want it to bump into a hard fence? And take your pick on what repairs look like that as well. And if enough of the fence goes down, then you're into a permit past a percentage of section. The concerns, I know that my car got stolen and dumped right in those woods that we're talking about. So I know that there's some activity that goes on there, and that can be a grounds for activity that's not one. I know some of our local auto dealers have had some significant issues through the years with criminal activity, with people busting in or so on and so on. One of the best things that can happen is have another business show up, because that's another set of eyes, another set of presence, and it's not a vacant property again that's being used for nothing but nothing. So I can't speak enough to the character from the conformity and the concurrency of the area. I think it's very reasonable. I think to the uniqueness of the lot and the uniqueness of they're telling you, hey, we're in the tow truck business for a long time, and you asked us to put a hard fence up there, that thing's going to get knocked down, and that makes sense. So ultimately, I hope you approve this, and I think that from a requirement, the opaque could be met with the vinyl netting. That would meet the intent. So thank you all for your consideration.
Any questions? Thank you. Next card, please.
Kay St. Ange.
Any other cards?
No, sir.
Okay. Come back to the commission. Any other questions? Anyone care to make a motion? No. Member Moscoso.
Okay, well, I make a motion to approve the conditional use permit number 3, 2024, 1210 South Hopkins Avenue, without any additional conditions.
Second.
Second by Member Childs. Any other discussion? Roll call, please, Lori.
Member Garad.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Aton.
Yes.
Member Childs.
Yes.
Member Moscoso.
Yes.
Secretary Grant.
Yes.
Member Faison.
Yes.
Chairman Richardson.
Yes. Okay, and this will be heard at city council meeting when, Brad?
June 11th.
Next week. Next item, landscape technical manual.
This is an ordinance on Agenda 9B. Begins on page 32 of your packet. I believe you're very familiar with this ordinance, so I won't go into background on this. But basically, for the new member, there was, it started last year, went to TEC, they recommended approval back last summer. Came to P&Z, there were some concerns, it went back to TEC, and we've been working on it again. We worked on it again with a consultant, and tonight is the first hearing on this ordinance. This was brought before City Council at the last meeting as a first reading of the ordinance. There were a few comments from the public at the time, and I'll go over that in just a moment. And the final public hearing will be on June 11th. The ordinance begins on page 35 of your packet. Beginning on page 36 of your packet, you'll see the strike through. That's existing language that's being struck through from the existing code and being replaced with what you see beginning on page 43 of your packet. It's a lengthy ordinance. I'm not going to go through all of this unless you have specific questions as to why something is added, or maybe a suggestion as to maybe removing it, or something else that probably should be added. But the direction we received from TEC is to combine a list that was provided to us by the Brevard Native Plant Society, and then to create these additional columns, which I'll just point out real quick, and to identify vegetation based on whether they are Brevard native, regional native, or an exotic non-native. And then there was a motion by the TEC to remove certain palms and identify them later as susceptible to the bronzing. On page 43 of your packet, beginning of the new list that's proposed, you'll see it says here, Table 1, approved trees and shrubs recommended for use in all landscape areas. That's the main title here. And under canopy trees, you list the trees that are canopy, and you've got the columns here, common area, botanical name, whether they're drought tolerant, salt tolerant, native to Brevard or to the region, wildlife or pollinators, yes or not. If you go further down on page 46, you'll see a new category, but the same columns, understory trees. Further down on page 49, you'll see a new category, palms. Page 50, shrubs, and so on as different categories. And that's consistent with the structure of the current code. That was something we recommended City Council maintain because that's consistent with how we implement the landscape code currently. I did pass out to, or send you in an email, comment or some information related to Shumard oak and some concerns about why that is included in the list. I did look at the minutes from your previous meetings. There was a discussion about it should be removed. I did not see it on the Native Brevard Society's list. So we are open to any suggestion as to maybe, as part of your motion, if you want to decide to approve this ordinance, maybe a motion to remove that specific species, or any others if you see. I did also in that email send you a response to some comments about what Vice Chairman of the TEC stated at the May 28th meeting of City Council. He identified 14 species that he thought were missing from the list. We researched them, and I provided to you kind of a response of where we found these lists. So several of them were just misspells, and he just obviously weren't able to find them, so we corrected those misspellings in the ordinance that's going to be submitted to City Council. Some of these are the same species. It just apparently had, I guess, depending on which source you're going to, it uses a different botanical name, but they're the same. So we identified those on this sheet that I sent to you in an email. And then there's also laurel oak that was omitted from the list here. If you believe that should be included in this list, that could be part of your motion as well. I'll try and answer any questions you have about this. I'm sorry, I don't have a specialist here to answer specific questions about any particular vegetation, but I will try my best to answer what I can. But I would recommend that you go ahead and make a motion on what you believe is right that includes either adding or subtracting any particular vegetation to City Council.
Member Moscoso.
Yeah, I never thought I would be so interested in trees, but I've learned a lot through this process, and I think this is something that we can be proud of. But I know a lot of the work came from our tree team and the Brevard Native specialist. Brad, my question for you is, how many of those 14 plants or trees were actually included that Mr. Majek had recommended?
How many of them are trees?
Or how many were included from the list that he sent? I think he sent like 14 that were left off. Did all 14 get added to the list that will be presented to council?
Okay, I understand. 4 of them were already there, so 10 are not on the list, according to his statement.
Okay. And I think our job now is to keep these developers accountable. I know it will be in our code, but I think the questions that we can ask when developers come up Are you willing to look at this list and actually plant this? Because there are other options. And so really push them as we've asked questions to really utilize this list and use Brevard native vegetation.
Secretary Grant.
Mr. Parrish, did you get any feedback from Mr. Majak at all concerning this?
On our responses here? No, sir.
Yes, sir.
Not yet.
Not yet?
No.
Thank you.
Mr. Rogers.
I'm just trying to remember, what is the percentage that are we trying to insist on a certain percentage, or are we trying to recommend a certain percentage? And what is the carrot and what is the stick that's going to achieve the certain percentage?
There's no regulatory percentage, if that's what you're asking, but there is a larger portion of the list, the recommended list, that is native.
Okay. And are you aware of any mechanism to incentivize a developer to use these? As Ms. Moscoso says, it's not that I don't care, I just didn't know, the influence that the native, tree and plant species have on, the insects and the birds and that sort of thing, that they're not going to eat a magnolia tree maybe or something like that because they don't know magnolia trees. But anyway, it does seem much more important to me than I knew in the past. And I guess I just wonder, are you aware of mechanisms in other communities whereby they try to get people to do this?
I have worked at other jurisdictions where they had a minimum percent of your proposed landscape plan must be native of some sort, and you have to demonstrate that with a landscape plan. I do not believe, I have to look at our code to see if we have a specific minimum. I'm sorry, I don't have an answer for that. But the way we apply this list, or we have applied the previous list that's currently in the code right now, is the developer takes that list and proposes a landscape plan, and they have to demonstrate to us that it's going to really work. So they propose plants and trees that are going to be in locations that are not the right place. We'll ask them, we'll question that, say, that is probably not going to work.
Right.
Propose something different, because we don't want to turn this development into an issue where code enforcement has to continually ask you to replant the same thing that's not going to work. So that's why we work with the applicants on a proper landscape plan.
Do you remember what the percentage was that in some place that you've run into a percentage that was enforced?
Sure. So I did work in one jurisdiction where they had a 10% minimum requirement, but that's in the code, and that's something they would have. It was a blanket statement, basically.
And how would we go about putting something like that in the code? How complicated is that to do?
That's an ordinance that would have to be done. Separate to this, because that's not included in this. And this ordinance was not advertised to allow that kind of changes. So if that is something that the P&Z wants to recommend to City Council, that would be a recommendation to them for advisability to go forward with a change to the code, a brand-new ordinance, basically.
Well, I'm just an alternate tonight, but I don't know. I certainly think that seems worthwhile to add to an ordinance. And frankly, I don't see why we should accept less than 51% if we're actually trying to do this right. But maybe other people have other ideas.
Member Garad.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I handed out a paper, as Mr. Parrish mentioned, they weren't going to have the consultant here. This is a print from USDA. Back when this proposal was first examined, I commented on the Schumert oak as not being a tree that would be expected to live in this area. The mapping that is provided by USDA, it's kind of ironic. I think that's the southern trajectory of the growth region for the Schumert oak. Looks to me like the Cross Florida Bard Canal geometry, but that's just something for history. But when the consultant mentioned that that was a tree that they believed was on the IFAS list, I still questioned that, and I remain in question. So I'm going to at least support a condition or place a condition that will remove that tree from the list. It's just not appropriate if you certainly are going to plant trees that would end up in roads, rights of way, as earlier tonight was mentioned. Long-term maintenance survivability then becomes a cost factor for everybody, and there's no point in going there. And I believe, Mr. Parrish, you said you removed the laurel oak from the list?
Laurel oak was removed from the list, and I believe, I I couldn't find this. I tried searching hard for this, but I thought there was a conversation with the consultant where she suggested that it'd probably be a good idea to remove that from the list.
My experience, and again, that being landscaping in public rights of way, laurel oaks are weak trees. Laurel oaks don't have a long lifetime, and when they get sick and die, the public has to come and remove them at their cost. So I'm glad they've removed that from the list. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I'll open the public hearing. Lori, the cards, please.
Casey Noj.
I figured it was you.
Hello again, Casey Hodge, Maryland Avenue. Yes, both TEC and P&Z have spent considerable time discussing the tech manual recommended list for landscapers. Kim Gibbs compiled the list of virtually all Brevard native plants and submitted it to you, TEC, and the consultant. And the consultant took these suggestions and came up with this amended list. According to my calculations, this list has 73% Brevard native or regional native plants, a big improvement over the original list of 33% native plants. Virtually all the plants on Kim Gibbs' list are on the amended consultant's list. I'm the one that compiled the list of 14 that were not included, and if I erred with forgive me. I will give you my suggestions about those 10 remaining here in a moment. The term Brevard native means a plant that will grow naturally in Brevard County without being planted or tended by man. Regional native plants grow naturally in another area of Florida, but will grow here if planted. Both Brevard native and regional natives are far better to plant here than non-native or Florida-friendly plants. Florida-friendly plants are ornamental plants, often from other countries that will grow here if planted. We need landscapers to plant native plants, as so many native plants are being removed by developers. Native plants grow here without additional water once established and need no fertilizers. Thus, approval of this amended list for the tech manual would be a big benefit for the lagoon and aquifers. Again, native plants attract native birds and the caterpillars and bugs that they feed on. Newborn birds are fed exclusively on caterpillars and bugs. We have gorgeous native songbirds in Titusville. The red cardinals, the tricolor painted buntings, goldfinches, Florida scrub jays and blue jays, among others, but habitat destruction is reducing their numbers considerably. In fact, nearly 30% of birds have vanished in the U.S. since 1970. Due to habitat destruction. Butterflies and pollinators also depend on native plants, and without these pollinators, production of fruits and vegetables is jeopardized. With the amended consultants list, it is more likely that developers, landscapers will choose more native plants from the list. However, they could avoid planting native plants from the list and choose exclusively from the 27% non-native. I suggest you approve the recommended amended list before you tonight, but a later time consider adding incentives for landscapers to plant a higher percentage of native plants. There is one palm still on this list that the consultant indicates is susceptible to lethal bronzing disease, the European fan palm. Okay, just another minute or two. In my opinion, this palm should be removed from the list as it could spread lethal bronzing disease to our native palms, and those exotic palms already. That's just one. I don't have any problem with the laurel oak being removed. I have laurel oaks all around my property. I monitor them carefully as they age. But if I were to be planting them, I would have planted live oaks that live 300 years rather than a laurel oak that lives only 40. So I agree. We should suggest live oaks rather than laurel oaks. As for the other 9 trees on the list that weren't included, I think it's fine. There's a lot of trees on this list and a lot of plants on this list, bigger than probably any community in all of Brevard. This list is large and it includes many, but I do think that at a later time, you should consider incentives. That's just my thoughts. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
All right.
Do you have a question of Mrs. St. Ange?
I just wanted to thank Mrs. St. Ange for bringing these sorts of issues to our attention and for being such a tireless volunteer and for being I don't know, polite about things that you're very passionate about, and just you're a real help to the community.
Absolutely, and you're seen planting trees Saturday at Sandpoint Park, along with Member Moscoso and her family.
We planted 50 trees at Sandpoint Park and 115 at Chain of Lakes, all native.
Next card, Lori.
Tony Schiffalo.
Schiffalo, Tropic Street. I don't have any prepared speech. I just came to show my enthusiasm for planting native plants. My real want and wish and dream would be to not unplant them at all to begin with, but to use low impact development, which I like to think of as sort of site specific art. And I wish it could be adopted. I wish it could be mandated. And I do think that planting native plants should be incentivized way up there. Write the incentives for the things you want. I want to remind staff, we heard that at the same seminar. I'll have to look up where that was at some point. Why not make planting native plants, or not disrupting as much as you possibly can, something to be desired, a bonus you get for that? Maybe you get to not have to plant 10 trees, but you get to have 8 native trees, just some kind of thing to really encourage developers to not take the easy road. So many cities, I listen to NPR at night when I don't sleep because the radio goes off by itself, and I do sleep because I always miss the punchline of the great stories, but I hear city after city after city and country after country after country trying to recreate their original tree canopies. They're planting and planting and planting. None of us are going to live long enough to see those 300-year-old trees again, or even the 100-year-old. I think only Miss Moscoso's children who were out there on Saturday planting will be the ones who get to walk down that pathway to the splash park with their children in the shade. Thank you for encouraging council and staff to encourage native plants. Native to Brevard County is even better. And then I want to rant just a little bit before I sit down because I have a second. I think that Kimley Horn consultant ought to return the $20,000 she got for making her list. Thank you. We could plant a lot of trees with that one.
Next card, Lori.
That was the last card.
Okay. Come back to the commission.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
if I could, I want to correct a statement I made earlier. Actually, we had several on the list that was of the 14 that were provided to us. Several were actually still on there. They were just misspelled, and some just had different botanical names, but they're the same. So we really have 7 that were not included in that we counted.
Okay, I would just make a comment that we've been working on this, I think, for a year or longer. And we're at a point right now that I think it's a good compromise. And I would agree with, Ms. St. Ange that we could change it anytime in the future. I don't want to nitpick this thing tonight. But we do need to take the Schumann oak off and the
What's the name of the palm?
European fan palm.
and the laurel oak off. But
Laurel, sorry.
okay. But I think this is a good compromise. If it goes to city council, would it go next week?
Yes.
Good thing to get this done. We can adjust it later. Member Garad, no?
That was my question. When you mentioned in your closing comment that you would be comfortable as it is written, and if it came back to be re-reviewed, including these other trees that aren't on there right now. Thank you.
Member Rogers.
I wasn't here when this started exactly, I don't think, but, so I might have this a little wrong, but it seems to me that, this was an example where we had an environmental question, but we weren't really involving the environmental board, exactly, or we hadn't involved them fully in this, so that's why it went back, and I guess I'd just like everybody to remember that seems like if we got an environmental question, that's what they're there for, like we should use our resources to the fullest.
Vice Chairman Aton.
I don't know, this Brad or Chelsea question. If we want to ask council for directing staff for advisement on drafting incentives, an incentive plan, do we do it as part of the motion or is that a separate thing?
I'd recommend it being a separate motion, so you could tackle whether or not you want to approve this as is, and then create a second motion for the board to comment on.
In other words, do one thing at a time. Member Rogers.
And also, would that be Chelsea, would that be separate, if you wanted to say what percentage you wanted to have native plants, would that be wrapped up in that same thing, or would it be a separate?
I'd suggest you have discussion on that after you make the first motion. Because council, it would be a recommendation to council regardless, but if you want to specify what you think certain, Member Ayton said, Vice Chair, sorry, mentioned incentives, so it could be more than just the percentage, but that's up for you all to discuss.
Anyone care to make a motion? Member Garad.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a motion to approve the list as presented in the ordinance, excluding and deleting the Schumer oak from the list. And then I believe what Mr. Parrish mentioned was it's a reconciled group with the right names on the ordinance, so however that reconciled document gets to the city council. European fan palm being removed, thank you.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please. Lori.
Secretary Grant,
Yes.
Member Faison,
Yes.
Member Childs,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Aton,
Yes.
Member Garad,
Yes.
Member Moscoso,
Yes.
Chairman Richardson.
Yes, and hallelujah.
I do have one question. When you said reconciled, are you talking about the remaining?
Yeah, you said that you've gone through and there were some you said you had some misspellings or that species, biological names were different, but that's all, you've got that reconciled.
Yes, those, but there are 7 on here that Mr. Myjack identified that are not on the ordinance.
Yes.
Okay.
Vice Chairman, it was you, Vice Chairman Aton.
I guess I'd like to make a motion to request council to direct staff at their convenience, understanding their workload, to draft incentives for development as it relates to planting Florida native plants as part of the development.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Member Childs. Any discussion? Member Faison?
Ready to say yes.
You're jumping the gun. Any discussion? Roll call, please, Lori.
Member Faison,
Yes.
Member Moscoso,
Yes.
Member Garad,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Aton.
Yes.
Member Childs.
Yes.
Secretary Grant,
Yes.
Chairman Richardson.
Yes. Okay. At this point, before we take up the Live Local Act ordinance, because we started this at 5 o'clock, I declare a recess for 10 minutes. We're apparently, okay. Next item, Live Local Act Ordinance. Brad?
The next item is Agenda 9C. This is the Florida Live Local Ordinance and Resolution. This is, on May 16th of this year, the governor signed into law Senate Bill 326, amending and clarifying the Live Local Act, Chapter 2023-17, Laws of Florida. The new law amends Section 166.04151 of the Florida statutes by clarifying application of the 2023 law, amending the ability to restrict floor area ratios of certain developments, amending the calculation of density, floor area ratio, and height for certain developments, authorizing height restrictions in certain circumstances, prohibiting administrative approvals within a specified proximity to a military installation, requiring the maintenance of policies on the city's website, requiring the consideration of reduced parking requirements under certain circumstances, and the reduction or elimination of parking requirements for certain mixed-use developments, amending the allowances for certain bonuses for density, height, of floor area ratio in certain circumstances, and addressing the treatment of specified developments as conforming or non-conforming uses under certain circumstances. So after that, there's several paragraphs here that specifically describe what this new law amended out of the original Live Local law. I won't go through all of that. We are amending the original ordinance number 48, 2023, which was adopted back in October, to be consistent with the amended Live Local law. On page 74 of your packet, you'll see the beginning of the amendment ordinance. You'll see on page 76 of your packet, beginning language of the original of the code. So in October, again, the Live Local ordinance that we adopted was adopted to help facilitate how we can implement our city code in the parameters of the Live Local law. And we put that into Chapter 29 of our code. You'll see here on page 76 of your packet, that code being amended again, consistent with the new law. And you can see it in strike through and underline. So Section 29-144, purpose, you'll see new language there, underlined, and old language is going to be struck through to be consistent with this new law. Primarily, you'll see the word project being replaced with the word development. On the same page, you'll see definitions, 29-145 of the code, being amended slightly to be more consistent with the new law. On page 77 of your packet, you'll see section 29-146, development standards. That first paragraph, paragraph A, is being amended. We initially came up with a series of agreements and to help implement the monitoring scheme program of a qualified Live Local project to be consistent with the law and consistent with our ordinance. Those agreements or those documents that we will require of an applicant to execute have been revised and names have been changed as well. So you'll see something there called a land use restriction agreement. You also see a pre-development acknowledgement. That's something that needs to be submitted with the initial application for administrative level site plan. And then towards the end, they'll have to execute this land use restriction agreement. And that will trigger the monitoring program that we'll have. On that same page, 77 of your packet, paragraph B, this is a pretty significant change here. We changed how we state here on the underlined sentence here, following issuance of a certificate of occupancy for the residential portion of the development, the property owner shall provide to the city on or before January 30th of each year an affordable housing development tenant compliance report. What that's referring to as part of that monitoring scheme. So on an annual basis, they'll need to provide this report to us, consistent with that land use restriction agreement. On the next page, on page 78, under the same section, subparagraph D, there's some additional language here too. We did add the statement here almost to the end of this paragraph where it's the floor area ratios. What we're stating here is that these are the preemptions that the Live Local law states. Allowable densities, floor area ratios, height, and land use. And that's referring to, if you recall, where the Live Local law has a land use preemption portion, where a qualifying Live Local project, which is a multifamily development, must be allowed to be approved administratively through the site plan process on a commercially zoned piece of property or an industrially zoned piece of property. And there are additional preemptions such as height. They must be able to utilize height limitations that we have in our code within a certain distance that are available to them. And densities as well. They can use our maximum density we have in the city. And also floor area ratios. What that, I believe, is referring to, statute now has this additional preemption, which pretty much states that you can't use your comprehensive plan maximum floor area ratio as a means of restricting a affordable housing, a Live Local qualifying project. So for example, if you're not familiar with floor area ratio, that has to do with, let's say, a floor area ratio of a particular area has 2.0. That means they can double the size of square feet on the property than the acreage of the property. But obviously that to meet other development standards. So that would not be a limiting factor. In this case, what the statute now says is that you can't restrict them more than 150% of your maximum floor area ratio. Further down on the same page, say page 78, paragraph F. We've added some additional underlined language there that's consistent with the statute. And I'm just going to read from where it starts with, well, here, I'll read the paragraph for you. Residential density within the development shall be a maximum of the highest currently allowed density on any land in the city where residential development is allowed under the city's land development regulations. For purposes of this section, the term highest currently allowed density does not include the density of any building that met the requirement of the act or this division, or the density of any building that has received any bonus, variance, or other special exception for density provided in the city's code. What that's referring to is a qualifying Live Local project comes in and they want to utilize the height that's allowed in the code, but they see another building within that mile that's got 10 stories or they're already 200 feet that might have received that approval prior to this act coming into effect through a variance process, for example. That doesn't vest a Live Local qualifying project to be able to utilize that. They have to use whatever was prescribed in the code only. That's what they can utilize. Paragraph H addresses some of that, addresses the floor area ratio as well. Paragraph I is where the mixed use component comes into play. The Live Local law talks about mixed use only when a jurisdiction has a cumulative area of commercial and industrially zoned areas that is less than 20% of the cumulative area of your city. We fall in that category, and many other cities in the state of Florida also fall in that category, and so now have to, when they approve a Live Local qualifying project, it must include a mixed use component. But the law does not prescribe how to do that. So the city, through several studies and several presentations and recommendations, decided to come up with this process you see here described as far as how they're supposed to meet that mixed use requirement. But one of the things that one thing that we've come across that's kind of an issue is when a project comes in, they have to use the non-residential portion of that project has to use the zoning, the underlying zoning, or the listed permitted uses of that underlying zoning district. But then the question that comes in, well, can they plat it? Can they separate that out? Can they build the residential first and then come in with the non-residential portion? So we've had some debates about that. So this paragraph is generally supposed to address that. Essentially, at the end, there will be a restrictive covenant stating that the mixed-use component, the residential and the non-residential portion of this whole development is going to be unified under one governing site plan. And there will be a restrictive covenant governing that. On page 80 of your packet, under paragraph L, the statute revised how we're supposed to allow for reduction of parking. We currently already have a process for that, but the statute originally included some provisions in how we're supposed to allow some more waivers to that parking if you're within a certain distance of a transit hub or a transit station. Well, the new law clarifies that some more and provides some more flexibility. In fact, or actually, in one instance, it actually reduced the buffer area or the area you're supposed to look at as far as allowing someone to be able to utilize this tool. So it used to be a mile radius. Now that transit hub has to be within a quarter-mile radius. And so now we have to be able to afford them to be able to use a reduction in their parking if they're within that more narrow area from where their site is going to be. So in other words, if there's a transit hub within that, a shorter area from their project. With that, I'll try and answer any questions you have.
Secretary Grant.
Mr. Parrish, could you explain the administrative approval process, please?
Thank you. A site plan is an administrative process according to the city's code. What that means is a site plan and engineer documents are provided to us for review by staff only.
Right.
And we review it through our administrative process consistent with the code. It doesn't require a public hearing or any kind of additional board approval of it. As long as they're consistent with the code, we can issue the permit.
There is no transparency then?
It's a public record.
Go ahead.
Titusville is the only one that does that, right?
No, sir. There are many jurisdictions that do have an
In
administrative.
Brevard County.
I don't know what other jurisdictions in Brevard
We're
County
the only
have.
one that does that. It does not come before P and Z or council in Brevard County.
That's crazy. I was going to suggest that maybe let P and Z be the administrator, since we would have a public forum before us, yeah, but
The live local law would not allow that.
they said city council wouldn't have anything to do with that, not P and Z.
Member Childs.
Brad, do you remember what I talked about during our last meeting where the county had passed or had chosen to opt out of the exemption? I don't know if you had a chance to
We're
look.
familiar with it, and yes, the county did do that, and we have, I did receive direction to put that onto the city council's agenda in December to ask them for advisability on that.
Okay.
What you're referring to
Yeah.
is a tax exemption program that the local jurisdictions, if they qualify, can opt out. In other words, it wouldn't be a benefit, wouldn't be able to be utilized by affordable
Yeah,
housing
it's only
project.
for everyone, so you know, it's anything, it's for housing that's for 80% to 120% of the median income, they wouldn't have an exemption anymore, which right now, if the city chose to not exempt themselves from it, from having an exemption for them, then they would get a 75%, the developer would get a 75% tax deduction on ad valorem taxes. So the county chose, and since Brevard County is a county that has, by the standards laid out by legislator, that they have enough affordable housing, then Brevard County is one of the counties that's able to go ahead and by 2/3 vote of whether either the municipality or the county to opt out of that, just that specific, not anything under 80%. So if they're doing housing that is really affordable and not 80 to 120%, which really isn't affordable, then that stays. But anything above 80%, you can go ahead and opt out of, just so you know.
Member Moscoso.
Yeah, I was at the Affordable Housing Summit, and they also mentioned that because Titusville has enough affordable housing units, we could opt out. So let me see if I can stumble through this. So 150% of the highest FAR currently allowed for any residential development within the jurisdiction. What would be our highest FAR for our jurisdiction?
5.0 in the downtown mixed-use land use category.
So 150%. So could you help me understand? I'm really trying to understand this. The higher the FAR, the more dense a development will be, correct? And I think we have to remember with this law, we can't manage the FAR, if that's correct. We can't put any restrictions on that. We have to go with that 5. Is that correct?
No, what it's saying, well, you can't restrict anything, you can't restrict the floor area ratio below 150%. 150% of that max.
Okay.
So you take that 5.0, increase by 150%.
7.5.
I'm
And
sorry, thank you.
that would
Then
be
you've
our,
got, that's the max density that you must allow, basically.
okay. And I think we have to remember that plays a big role in our infrastructure. The higher density, the more infrastructure it requires. Could you give us what that would look like practically? I know that the Bristol development is a Live Local Act. So what would that look like for that with height, as well as something, let's say, in West Titusville, since we were just discussing that? And does the FAR, does that go hand in hand with the height restriction? Like if the FAR is 7.5, that means the building could be really high, but then we're saying it only can be 3 stories. So maybe you can explain that a little bit.
The law allows you to use the maximum height that the city allows within, I believe, a mile of the project. So if the project's to be located in Zone X, and within a mile of it, you got in Zone Y an ability to go where a stipulation or regulation that says you can go up to 100 feet, they can use that for their property.
So if the FAR for downtown could it possibly allow a building of 10 stories?
The height and floor area ratio are 2 different things.
Mm-hmm.
So remember when all the regulations come into play to potentially restrict what your actual development can be. So your density is one regulation. This is your max density number of units you can put on there. This is your floor area ratio. That's a different standard. Height, setbacks, whatever that might be, all the other standards within the city's code help bring the development to the size that is actually allowed based on what they're trying to do.
So one doesn't supersede the other. They all have to work together. Is that
Yes.
correct? Okay, thank you.
Member Rogers.
Just see on page 77, A and B, there's a fair amount of talking about, making sure that that the units are actually affordable, and how there will be monitoring of that and certificate of occupancy and city administrator and, checking leases for the affordable units. Did we ever put any kind of a penalty, in on that? I mean, like if they don't conform, then what happens?
So that's why we had the monitoring scheme program in place. So if they do not, that helps us determine compliance. And if they're not in compliance, then we'll have to work with them to bring them to compliance. We always have to do that, give them an opportunity to do that. And if they're not doing that, then it's a code enforcement issue. And so code enforcement and our regular code enforcement process comes into play. So if it becomes an egregious issue, like any other court enforcement case, it may have to come before the magistrate, and there may be fines applied.
Okay, I just remember that, I don't know, Winter Park had something that they put in, like, it was $5,000 a day for, for the offenses or something like that. I mean, it really had some teeth to it, and I kind of liked that. I just wonder if maybe we shouldn't move in a little bit more aggressive direction. The other question was on page 72, I just didn't quite understand this. Just the second to last bullet on 72. It said, let's see, I think it was the second to last. No, third to last. So let's see, provides the land use preemption does not apply to airport impact areas as provided, and it removes the exception for recreational and commercial working waterfront. So the land use preemption, what is that about recreational and commercial working waterfront? How did that change? I mean, does that mean that Live Local can now go into recreational and commercial working waterfront, or is that?
I have to look at this. I mean, the law is actually attached to your agenda on page 83. And in there, it made some, I guess the original portion of the law, and Chelsea, help me if I'm wrong on this, but I thought that there was a preemption. In other words, that this Live Local preemptions don't apply to those properties within working waterfronts.
Right.
And now that has been removed.
So now they do apply, the Live Local preemptions do apply to recreational and commercial working waterfront.
Yeah, so if it removes that exception, now it's saying that if you got the right zoning, commercial, industrial, or mixed use within those working waterfronts, then those properties can be, Live Local qualifying project can fall there too now.
Swell.
Are you through, Member Rogers? Okay. Member Garrard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the same vein as Ms. Boskov was talking about floor area ratios, and Brad had mentioned taking the stories of the building and compressing it on an acre with a 2.0 FAR. I discussed with staff earlier in our telephone conversation a matter which I have witnessed, and it's not something that's rare by any measure. It's actually less rare. It's practically speaking more common. If you, in your mind's eye, members of the commission can picture Champions Gate or Reunion or the area of Epcot that's Disney Villages. And when you go down I-4, you'll have plenty of time to look at it because all the traffic stops at Champions Gate. Every day they tell you that on the news. The developer utilizing planned development zoning district allowances, where you're negotiating a development standard and creating your own development rule, created a subdivision provision that allows the buildings, in this case, their timeshares, their resort hotels, and in some cases, their clubhouses. The allowance to negotiate that standard whereby the subdivision lot is coterminous with the building footprint. So at that point, you have zero land other than the footprint of the building. The significant reason I'm concerned about this, and in speaking with staff, it's kind of like the native plant discussion. This needs to be addressed later. The statute's kind of bound the hands of local government for anything other than following what has been described in the statute. However, the negotiation to a planned development would allow a person, in the case of my examples given, to create a subdivision lot interior to the development site. The measurement criteria that's in the statute, and that'll be a question for Chelsea if you wouldn't mind, if the measurement criteria says you are not able to restrict a building's height within a quarter mile, regardless if it's a big tall building next to detached single-family homes or not, it's that standard begins a measurement of a quarter mile. Well, if you are savvy in what you're doing, you can create a development interior to the development site, and then the quarter mile is going to be measured from your building. In other words, you could capture no restriction to the surrounding boundaries by having The biggest place I could say I could see that as an example of doing that is the Just Parish Hospital or the development where the Boeing building is. You've got distances from some of those buildings, it's approximating a quarter mile, and you haven't even gotten to US 1 yet. This would be something that would occur potentially in the future, but because this statute and now the city ordinance, it sets up a leapfrog effect. If I get one, then I start my quarter mile measurement from my new place to the next one, and pretty soon you can probably imagine with high 150% FAR, if I did a subdivision whereby the footprint of the building was the building legal description, you'd have a tremendously high FAR, but you probably aren't going to exceed 150% of 5.0 or 7.5 FAR to the land area. You'd see a 20, 30-story building based on that, and you'd exceed that quarter mile. Your impact would be checked. So my point of my rambling is to suggest that in the same vein as the council mentioned earlier about going back and looking at this, I think that it would be fair that the city would be in compliance with the statute, but however, it would have some type of definitional standard that when you negotiate a zoning district under a plan development criteria, that you can make your measurements from the, as Mr. Parrish mentioned, the boundary of the site. We talked about site plans, but if you subdivide land under a provision, the boundary is not where you're going to measure it from. You're going to measure it from the description of the property, which is built under the Live Local Act. And so it would take some development of a new standard that you would create a check to that potential, the allowance to do that.
Are you referring to getting a Live Local qualifying project in an existing plan development?
No, what I'm envisioning is that, and I'll use Titus, the retirement home here. I don't know the name. Titusville Towers. That's a building which this statute and this ordinance is going to set a criteria that the quarter mile is going to take you over to the railroad track, approximately. If you go south on US 1, the next tallest building you're going to find is another residential.
But you're concerned that because some developer already utilized or got a height, such as the example you just mentioned, that someone else who's trying to get a Live Local qualifying project can use that height that they got for that development that was built and approved several decades ago to put on their property now too.
Yes.
That's not the case. They can, so if they got if the height at the time that development was approved allowed that height, that's one thing, but a Live Local qualifying project can only use the height that's available in the code as written today. So in other words, if the height right now on that property is less than what that building is, that's a non-conforming building. Or receive the variance. That doesn't give them a Live Local qualifying project benefit doing that.
I'm sorry, I misspoke. That wasn't my concern, and I don't consider that a non-conforming building. I'm using a scenario, for example, and I'll use the project that has yet to build the building. I believe in the case of the year, approved a allowance for a planned zoning district on the south end of Titusville at the NASA Causeway that had a height limitation, and we exceeded that height limitation. If that building were built in my scenario by another developer at another site, not that one's the measurement basis. That's my benchmark. I take that quarter mile from that tallest building and I run it across the NASA Causeway and I go into Riverside Drive. And I come in with a plan development request in which I'm going to footprint a building with a zero boundary. I have the site, and it's all the parking lot and all the landscaping and all the other stuff. But it is, however, an allowance to subdivide the land under the building footprint. By that measurement criteria, I may be able to gain land and erode the quarter mile buffer that the statute provides for and the city ordinance mimics, as it would be. The next project I can do that again in, and pretty soon I'm having impacts that the criteria should have protected for, but it isn't because I'm keeping that quarter mile within otherwise undeveloped with building footprints, open space, landscaping, and parking. But my measurement benchmark begins at the building.
Are you asking, so your scenario is that someone could come in and utilize the plan development process to create a potential to use a Live Local
Yes.
later?
Especially if it was repetitive. If I was a developer and I came in and said, I'm going to do my project, and I did that, but I'm a developer, so I go to the next project and I do it again, pretty soon, anything that was supposed to be a quarter mile away isn't going to matter.
Some communities have actually called out planned developments from the calculation of what is commercial and industrial. They've excluded those out.
Yeah, anything, mine's a notion that could occur. There are examples where that exists. It's not a condition that's common here in Titusville. It's a condition that is used in other areas. But it's a scenario, in my mind, on my experience, I see happening or potentially, and it would be my 2 bits worth to say that might be something to sit down and kind of figure out if that's going to protect people who otherwise are merely protected by the quarter mile criteria.
Chelsea?
I would like to direct your attention to page 88, which is the new statute, and letter D, subsection 1, talks about the discussion we're having here, and that is also on 78 in our code language. We talk about that specific topic. But what this statute requires is it's actually 1 mile. It's not a quarter or a half mile, it's 1 mile. So I wanted to clarify that point. The distance from the height, 1 mile. And it also, the new statute adds clarification language for the purposes of this paragraph. The term highest currently allowed height does not include the height of any building that met the requirements of this subsection. So you can't piggyback or leapfrog off of a live local building that has gotten extra height and use that as part of your calculation. You have to use what's currently allowed in the code, notwithstanding Live Local Act. So that's what that sentence, part of that sentence means. But it also says, or the height of any building that has received any bonus, variance, or other special exception, which I think is what Brad was saying about the PDs, for heights provided in the municipality's land development regulations. So like the planned development project, if they had gotten a special exception or a variance or a bonus as a part of their development, that wouldn't be able to be utilized for a new development to piggyback off of that height. So it has to be what is allowed in our code now within a mile of the proposed site.
Chelsea, thank you for your response. Perhaps my question is, in Titusville, buildings that are compliant, that perform to the standards adopted, I used a couple of buildings as an example, are conforming buildings and they're very tall. If a Live Local Act site were to come forward and propose a development in which that Live Local site would come in under the cover of a planned development request, and if my request is to establish a really unique zoning standard, making me conform after development of a building footprint is a legally described property and it is compliant with minimum lot area, minimum lot coverage, floor area ratio, and all those other sundry development standards. At the end of it, that new development site that took its allowance for height limitation exceptions under the statute came in and it conformed to that height limitation exemption in the statute and the city ordinance. The next site leapfrogs off of that, whereby I've created a building developed within the boundary of the development site, quote unquote. But now I'm a quarter mile or a half mile of property. I'm 2,500 feet's not an exaggerated distance on a large scale development. I use a couple in my examples. They're large scale developments. And some buildings within that may be at the very boundary of that 1 mile or quarter mile. But in my opinion, it's going to continue to erode the protection afforded it that you were supposed to make sure you didn't go more than a mile from the tallest building and propose a very high floor area ratio, very tall building, and then the next leapfrog event occurs in the same measure based on a standard that gets approved in the PD. I really appreciated Mr. Parrish's response that if you took PD as an exceptional zoning district and equated it not as a variance or a special exception, but as a zoning district that's not one you use that for. If that was a sound measurement exemption prohibition, that would be perfect. Then that may be a great idea to explore using another community standard that works in. But I'm having a difficulty seeing how I couldn't do that. If I said, here's my 20-story building, I go 1 mile from it, I get my zoning district that says my building's a half a mile from my boundary, you approve my PD zoning that says footprint of building, I go another mile from that building, I do another proposal. And I mean, this thing that concerns is the statute is being written to accelerate and excite affordable housing development. And these standards are being exempted so that you have such flexibility, you can really go forward and prosper with affordable housing, which you should do on one hand, but try to reduce the negative impacts that may cause people. And my concern is how a negative impact could be massaged to do otherwise.
I do understand what you're saying. I think that issue you're bringing up would probably be more relevant if we were in a larger, like a county. Our city of our size is going to be impacted no matter what. I'm going to point you, I just saved into the agenda star on your desktop. If you want to minimize your agenda and you see on your desktop, there's a little icon called agenda star. And you double click in there and open up that file. You'll see a PDF document I've just added in there called LLA height in Titusville. And you open that up and you'll see a PowerPoint presentation slide that we gave the council last year that shows, per the Live Local Act, height is pretty much pretty high wherever you are in the city based on the way the city's code is. I don't know if you can see it. You'll see a map. There are many zoning districts currently within a mile of every property that does not have a maximum height limitation, period. And so they would be restricted on having to, they would have to go over a certain height, they'll have to increase their setback as a result. But there are many areas of the city that don't even have a maximum height. So I think the fear of someone trying to utilize the code as it's written right now, utilize zoning tools like PD to kind of prepare themselves to be able to use more flexibility, I think that's, I'm not sure that's going to be beneficial when they've already got that right within the confines of the city's code right now, because we're such a small jurisdiction and almost every property is affected by the height limitations, such as up to 100, up to 150 feet, and in many cases, there's no height limitation.
Okay.
I think and understood you, but we could certainly, I'd love to have a conversation with you about it afterwards if I didn't understand that.
This is something that needs to be addressed somehow. Maybe I'm not making as much sense as I'd hoped to. But I'll just footnote, and I appreciate Titusville's small town type of history, but in Florida, that was just today, more information about migration of people to the state of Florida for various reasons is a magnet that's unprecedented. And so for development purposes, if I want to play that game, I have to annex to some city. You have to be provided the water and sewer from the city. They're going to make you annex. So what would be the potential in the future that large patterns of property, either north or south of the current boundaries, come in and somebody says, I've got this 5,000 acre cow field that's at 5A, and I'd like to make a planned development out of it. And I could footnote that scenario, but we'll talk about it another time. It's just something I think the city ought to explore just to be sure it's protecting everybody by what was well intended in the statute on one hand, but could be massaged to not be the best intention.
Okay. We'll open the public hearing. Lori, do we have any cards?
Yes, Case and Hodge.
Case Hodge, Maryland Avenue. I will be honest with you. This is personal to me. The developer of the 30 acres of woods immediately adjacent to our property, I mean immediately adjacent, has indicated he intends to submit a site plan to build under Live Local. Council had indicated at a first reading that they wanted the land to retain hospital medical zoning as the property is across US from the hospital. Well, but the developer insists that he will build under Live Local. 30 acres times 40 units per acre equals 1,200 units. as high as the hospital. That's how I understand it. If I'm wrong, that's why I'm going to ask some questions, if you don't mind. Please, might I ask a question or two? I understand site plans for Live Local Act developments are processed through the Development Services Office. How can the public receive these site plans? We have a Freedom of Information Act. I would think that we should be able to ask for these site plans. So will these meetings be open to the public? And if so, are schedules posted on the website? How can I ask for a site plan from the Development Services Department? Approximately how long would the process be from the site plan submission to the building permit being issued? When Live Local developments submit site plans for properties in the area of critical concern, will they still be required to follow code which states in areas of critical concern the total of all impervious surfaces shall not exceed 40% of total area of development? Is there an open space requirement for these developments building under Live Local Act? And would these two codes, the ACC code and any open space code, reduce the 40 units per acre allowed? Those are my questions, and maybe I could get a response. Thank you.
Thank you. Next card. If he's going to respond.
Would you like me?
Yeah.
Okay. So the site plan process is an administrative process which does not go before a public body, and that is specifically stated in the law. It says on page 87 of your packet, I'm just going to quote what the law here says. I missed it. A municipality must authorize multifamily and mixed-use residential as allowable uses in any area zoned for commercial, industrial, or mixed use if at least 40% of the residential units in the proposed multifamily development are rental units that, for a period of at least 30 years, are affordable as defined in the statute. Notwithstanding any other notwithstanding any other law, local ordinance, or regulation to the contrary, a municipality may not require a proposed multifamily development to obtain a zoning or land use change, special exception, conditional use approval, variance, or comprehensive plan amendment for the building height, zoning, and densities authorized under this section. So it must be an administrative process. We currently have that in process now, but if a Live Local project, they're only preempted by certain things by the state law. Everything else they have to abide by. So if the property is going to be in an area, the area of critical concern, they have to abide by that regulation. If it's going to have to, any other kind of regulation the city may have, it has to abide by that, including other regulation, other policies of the comprehensive plan. If they need to get a deviation from a development standard, a land development standard, there may be a process for that. There may be a variance to allow them to deviate from it, or an administrative waiver, such as our parking reduction process is an administrative waiver before an administrative body called a Development Review Committee, which is made up of staff members, and that is open to the public. So, however, if a project can meet all the requirements of the comprehensive plan and the code and still utilize all the exceptions that are preemptions that are in the law, it must be approved administratively.
Next card, Lori.
So I have a question for Brad, if that's okay. So Brad, on page 95, number 1, it says require the county or municipality to post on its website a list of properties receiving the exemption for the purpose of facilitating access to affordable housing. So that means you would list all the Live Local properties. I've noticed it on the GIS that we do have Bristol as listed, but this is under, I guess, laws of Florida. So would that mean it needs to be listed?
We don't have a formally approved Live Local qualifying project, if that's what you're asking.
But so according to this, does that mean it needs to be listed? It's page 95, number 1.
Chairman. I think what that means is, I think they had to put a list of properties that would be acceptable,
For affordable housing?
if that's what, go ahead.
It looks like that's under section 196.1979, county and municipal affordable housing property exemption, which then continues to talk about receiving an ad valorem property tax exemption. So that's not the same as getting the site development rights to develop under the paragraph that Brad just referenced. There's many different tax exemptions that are also included, but we're just looking at subsection 7 of the Live Local ordinance, and this is something entirely different on page 94 that is a different statute that I'd have to look at to give you more clarity on what the ad valorem what properties are qualified for the ad valorem exemptions, but it's not the same as which ones are qualified to build under 7A.
Yeah, I was just thinking of, as she mentioned, how do you get access to the site plans? And so,
A public records request, yeah.
okay. I was just seeing if it was required that it was online, then there could be something perhaps underneath that showed how someone would get if they wanted to see the site plan for that. They would, because most people honestly are not going to be, not going to know how to do that. Unless they come to a meeting, you've got to figure out who you need to email. And so while it's listed on the website, maybe have a link to say, if you're interested in more information, this is who you need to email. And let's make it easy for people to get that information. Thank you.
That public records request is a fee involved, right?
If the record request requires significant staff time, then we'll have to calculate what that fee would be.
Card?
Tony Shiflow.
Carry them, I'm too tired. Shiflow, Tropic Street. Several things have come up, and I really appreciate the deep discussion that you have, and I appreciate the fact that staff will allow that. I wanted to speak first about the tax. Building materials used in a unit with a newly constructed affordable housing development are exempt from sales to tax by way of a refund after they get completed. Building materials means tangible personal property that becomes part of a newly constructed unit in an affordable housing development, including appliances. Isn't that neat? They'll get tax exempt for all of that. Now, for my prepared remarks, I spoke with a friend advocate for citizens' rights who is extremely demoralized by recent council votes for development and the future impact of the new Live Local Act. I've spent a lot of time on this legislation, as has our staff, and we're confused and conflicted on a lot of the same issues raised by the state. Our local Live Local Act needs to be closely scrutinized, compared with our comprehensive plan and the numerous surveys of citizens about the future of our town. Our ordinance needs to be refined and reinforced in areas that give our current residents the most protection, while the state law tries to give every advantage to the developer who claims an intent of affordable housing. The removal of height and density restrictions in the building of apartment buildings, not condos, gives the developer freedom to build whatever he wants with very few parameters for public space, parking, or environmental impact. In fact, nowhere in the state or local Live Local Act does the environment come into play at all that I've read. We can't do much to change the state policy. However, you, on our Planning and Zoning Commission, have the power to make the city slow down, carefully review, and modify this abhorrent imposition from the state, taking away our rights as landowning, tax-paying, voting citizens of Titusville, Florida, taking away our rights to make any decision about the look and integrity of our neighborhoods. Thank you for your due diligence. Thank you for your attention to the matter.
Next card.
Katie Delaney.
Hi, everyone. Katie Delaney. I'm here to talk about the Live Local Act update.
as you guys spoke about earlier, Brevard County voted at the last commission meeting to opt out of the tax breaks for Live Local projects. And I would recommend that Titusville does the same. I recommend that they do that at the next council meeting, because every project that gets approved before this opt-out is grandfathered in to those tax exemptions. So the faster we get this done, the better, because we need in Brevard County, every city and the county needs these ad valorem taxes because of our aging infrastructure. And just like, you know, Titusville, there's a lot of issues with the sewage systems here. And this governmental overstep from the state, it's horrible. And I'm going to do everything in my power to fight back against this at the state, but at least at the local level, this is something that we can do to protect our communities, because these developers, they're not helping enrich the American dream of home ownership. This is rentals we're talking about. And especially for the 80 to, 120%. So this is not helping the needy. This is bringing in rentals for people who have pretty good paying jobs. Like these rental apartments are usually around $2,000 to $3,000 a month. That's not affordable. So I just urge the council, I know they're not here right now, but I urge them to pass this as soon as possible. And I also have a question. I was under the assumption that Live Local projects were exempt from public records. So I didn't know if you could help us with that.
No, we're
Okay.
not aware of that.
And is there any language from what you read before that's specific about why this group can't be the administrators? Because even if they can't change the project, at least it would be more transparent.
I can only read again that same section, page 87 of your packet, what the law says. And so, no, a local jurisdiction cannot require a public hearing for a Live Local qualifying project. We're prevented from doing that.
Thank you.
Any other cards?
No, sir.
Okay. Bring it back to the commission. I think you all know how I feel about the whole Live Local debacle. I voted against it last time, and I voted against it tonight. It's nothing but a reduction in home rule. And it's the most idiotic bill that I've ever seen come out of the Florida legislature. And I'm not gonna vote for it and disagree with it. So that's where I stand. Anyone care to make a motion? Anyone have anything to say? Mr. Rogers.
Is there some way, it seems almost immoral under these circumstances to require citizens or groups of citizens in the community to have to file, I don't know, what is it, Freedom of Information request or something like that, and pay money for that?
Yeah.
Couldn't there be, I mean, it adds to the impression, although frankly, I don't think it's an impression, I think it's a fact that this is all designed to, just kind of shunt everything forward, kind of in the dark of night and get it done, and put the money in the developers' pockets as quickly as possible and without any input or say so or from any of the affected parties. But couldn't there be some sort of little summary that was put together that was just made public and put on, we've got this Live Local project and here's what it's doing, and we've got that Live Local. I mean, yeah, he's right. Brad's right. We're not going to have a hearing about it. We're not going to have a meeting. But I mean, couldn't we, I don't know, just at least give people a little bit of information from the inside so at least they.
We have a development applications interactive map that we created many years ago and been maintaining, trying to do this on a weekly basis and update it with the status of any particular site plan that we have, or rezoning application, whatever that might be. But there's one portion there that's all about site plans, major site plans coming through. So we try to update information about if we've received it, it's in review, or it's approved, or it's in construction. So we can certainly say additional information on there about what that particular project is on that same form where people can get information about a particular site plan and state whether we have received a request for a Live Local qualifying project. But I think that's the best we can do. If we try to treat Live Local projects and their review and approval differently than any other that would also be required to go through an administrative process, then we're not being equitable.
Yeah, I'm not saying you go through an administrative process. I just say, I don't know, let people know what's happening, because otherwise it's, I just think it makes people more and more angry. And I don't know, maybe we just need to get more and more angry. Maybe that's a good thing. But I mean, I think it gets some torches and pitchforks angry. Well, you decide yourself whether that's a good thing. But I just think, people they're confused and they're upset and they're flying blind, and eventually they're going to take it out somehow.
Member Moscoso.
Yeah, I mean, it is on the GIS, but I don't know how many of you guys look at the GIS map. I do, but I can guarantee a lot of even our commissioners are not looking at that, so I don't expect the public to be doing that. So could you come back our next meeting and maybe give us some options of things that we could promote it? With Chelsea's help on that, where we wouldn't be violating the law, maybe a site that says to look for Live Local and direct them to GIS, something so that I don't think the GIS map is going to be the first place that people go to, because there's just so much information on there. And so I just don't want us to lose this conversation and nothing be done. And so possibly the next meeting, if we could have some options, I would appreciate it.
Member, go ahead. Chelsea.
If you go to the City of Titusville's website and use the search bar and type in Live Local Act, there are 599 results. I don't know how many of them are directly applicable to what you're looking for, but the second click, or first really, will bring you to a website that the city maintains on the Live Local Act. It talks about a background, and then it talks about the land use standards, and then the procedures and the resources, which are codified through last year, because what we're talking about hasn't been codified. So I know that the resources are going to be updated once 2024 is adopted by City Council, of course, assuming that this ordinance is adopted. I would suggest that this ordinance does get adopted because it incorporates the changes of the new Florida statute law and incorporates all of the standards that are now our Florida law. But beyond that, we do not have any approved Live Local projects at this time, but I could see that this page being a great location to put an approved project, but that would be after it's approved. And perhaps that would be an acceptable solution, but it is not going, I don't know that it's realistic to ask the city to put projects that aren't approved on a project website for Live Local when they would be premature. I just don't know if I can speak to that right now.
We can explore the alternatives.
But then also on the search results for the Live Local Act, the third link is the affordable housing surplus property list. And I'm not sure, Member Moscoso, if you've seen this, but the 2023 laws of Florida required that the city to publish on our website all city-owned properties that are suitable for affordable housing. And so that is present on our website.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. That's great. I didn't see that before, so I appreciate that.
Member Phillinder.
I was just gonna ask if we could have a report, like once, or request a report once a month where we just go over any unapproved projects. Would that be allowed or legal?
We can share with you what we share with city council on a quarterly basis. We have a comprehensive list of all site plans and their status, and we can certainly share that with you as well.
Okay.
I think I passed previous versions to you before already.
Okay.
And you can see what's coming through or what's in review, including any live local qualifying projects.
Is that the site plans you were just talking about, Chelsea, on the website, or those are just the lists of the potential sites?
There was no sites on what I was just talking about.
Oh.
It talked about the process and the procedures currently in place as of the 2023 ordinance being adopted. And once 2024's version is adopted, assuming that city council adopts it, then that will then be uploaded to the city's website.
Okay.
Member Garad.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A comment as a follow-up when you said, if you have any comments regarding opposition to approving an ordinance that is required, or as the public mentioned, the concern of such an ordinance. It reminds me of John Mellencamp's song in which the verse says, "I fought authority, but authority always won." The state has passed a statute that if the local government doesn't cover that statute, then the local government is going to be fighting authority, and that authority is going to win, period. And I believe from what I've seen, this is just a reiteration of the Live Local Act, subject to an amendment in the statutes that came as a modification. And as the public mentioned earlier, the solution to the concerns are probably to speak to the legislature so that the legislature wants to change this. They can certainly change the state law. They proved that pretty quickly from the first iteration to the amendments. And I just would implore the other members to recognize you don't have a lot of option with this thing.
Sometimes you just got to give them the middle finger.
I understand that. And you remind me of John Mellencamp.
Thank you.
Sure.
Member Childs.
I was just gonna say that I think since the city's already passed this and then the state already updated it, there's not a lot of reason for us not to update this. I think there's every reason to update it because it wouldn't make sense to leave it as it is, and I don't think the city's going to undo it. And it gives the staff some direction on how they proceed. So I think we should probably move forward with adopting the changes, even if we don't like everything. But
okay.
Just so you know, there is an additional item included on the same agenda. On page 99 of your packet, we're amending the resolution that's associated with the ordinance as well. The resolution has a fee that's changing a little bit, and there are references to agreements.
Any other discussion? Anyone care to make a motion?
see, another look at
Member
me.
Childs.
Oh man, my thing all switched. I make a motion that we recommend approval to City Council for the updates to Live Local Act ordinance.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Member Moscoso?
Yes.
Member Garad?
Yes.
Secretary Grant?
Yes.
Member Childs?
Yes.
Member Faison?
Yeah, he had to go to the airport.
Vice Chairman Aton?
Yes.
Chairman Richardson?
No. For reasons I've already stated. When will council hear this?
We only heard a motion for the ordinance. Sorry to interrupt. The city council will hear the public hearing on June 11th, but there's a resolution that's in this agenda item.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please. Member Moscoso? Okay. Roll call, please.
Vice Chairman Aton?
Yes.
Secretary Grant?
Yes.
Member Garad,
Yes?
Childs,
Yes.
Member Moscoso,
Yes.
Chairman Richardson.
No. Okay, that'll be heard at council meeting next week. Next
Yes.
item, Brooks Landing.
Your last item, 9D, is the Brooks Landing Phase 2 Final Site Plan. This is on page 101 of your packet. Brooks Landing Phase 2 is a proposed 62 lots, single-family subdivision located north of JJ Road and west of Hammock Road. The overall Brooks Landing subdivision consists of 143 lots total on approximately 72 acres. The final plat for Phase 1 was previously approved by P&Z on July 19th, 2023, and council on July 25th. The following are attached and require approval and acceptance. The final plat, covenants, performance bonds for required infrastructure and sidewalks. We believe that the final plat is consistent with the comprehensive plan, the preliminary plat, final plat requirements described in the code. Staff has reviewed the final plat for consistency with the PD, plan development zoning ordinance, comprehensive plan, land development regulations, and recommends approval. Staff has also reviewed the covenants, performance bonds, and easement, and recommends acceptance. I do want to state, though, that there are a couple of conditions that we are going to recommend to City Council, and we'd like to bring those up to your attention. I've failed to have printout copies for you, so I put them in Agenda Star. And if you minimize your agenda and look at the desktop, you'll see that icon, Agenda Star. It looks like a star. And just open that up, and you'll see a document in there called Brooks Landing Plat Conditions. If you need any help opening that, please tell me. We'll come around and show you.
If you don't have an icon, I have two icons that look like a star.
So if you see that document, I've got an agenda star. This is going to be the cover sheet or report to City Council. And you'll see under there, recommended action, approve the final plat with everything I just stated, with two additional conditions. The first one states, the following language be added to the plat. Quotations required, city disclosure. The following disclosures are provided pursuant to city requirements. At the time of recording the plat, the infrastructure is not complete. Building permits, including but not limited to permits for construction of single-family homes, will not be issued until all required infrastructure is completed pursuant to the City of Titusville Code of Ordinances and the LDRs. This notice will expire at the date of issuance of a certificate of completion for this subdivision. This is related to the bond for infrastructure. Condition 2, language be added to the plat dedication stating that easements dedicated to the public are also dedicated to the City of Titusville. That's to clarify what we saw in the plat where it says dedicated to the public, and this we just want to clarify that is specifically to the City of Titusville. So with that, I'll try and take any questions you have.
Any questions of Mr. Parrish? At this time, does this require a public hearing, Chelsea?
Yes.
Okay, this time I'll open the public hearing. Is there anyone want to speak about this? Hearing none.
I'm sorry, the applicant was not able to show this evening, so they do not have a representative for them tonight.
Okay. Comes back to the commission. What's your pleasure? Vice Chairman Aton.
I'll make a motion to approve the final plat and acceptance of covenants and performance bonds for Brooks Landing Phase 2, including the two recommended conditions.
Second.
Second by Member Childs. Any other discussion? Roll call, please. Lori?
Member Childs,
Yes.
Secretary Grant,
Yes.
Member Moscoso,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Aton,
Yes.
Member Garad,
Yes?
Chairman Richardson.
Yes. Okay, item 10, petitions and requests from the public present. Come on. I considered, we discussed this several months ago, And I've watched what has gone on with the county commission and what has gone on with the Titusville Environmental Commission. And I cast a vote that kept petitions and requests where it is. And I would like to put that on the agenda for the next meeting, and we'll discuss it again.
What, to move it? To move it? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. I've seen what goes on at the county commission and what went on at TEC, and I think it's helped TEC to some degree. And you got to think that rarely, though, is there a person that sits out there in the audience with this great idea that's about something that's not on the agenda. They sit out there, and some of our meetings have gone on until 1 or 2 o'clock. Or 9:15. So maybe we should hear them in the early part of the meeting. So,
Yeah, I was just going to take a minute. Shifalo Tropic Street. I wanted to speak, and this isn't on the agenda, but it is something that came up. The GIS map that showed the city-owned properties that are, recommended for or available for affordable housing. I checked that, it's been a while, so there's maybe more, and I may be dealing with outdated notes. But there were 12 listed at the time I looked, and only one was outside my neighborhood, my neighborhood is bounded by Garden Street, the railroad tracks, South Street, and Park. And only one out of the 12 was outside of that. Oh, well, I must admit, a couple of them were across South Street in the Joinerville neighborhood, the former Joinerville area, which used to kind of spill over South Street up to Pine Street. So I kind of consider that an adjunct of the neighborhood, but only one outside of that area, and the city owns them, and it's for affordable housing. And we have this affordable housing ordinance that gives these developers all these incentives to just build.
Katie Delaney. I also wanted to talk about West Titusville. And I didn't get to say it earlier today, but the increased density issues, that is huge because we're having a shortage of drinking water in North Brevard. And Titusville is already pulling water from outside of its area. So that's something to seriously consider. Also, the sewage issues that we're having in the city of Titusville as well. When we cram in apartment complexes, that's only going to get worse. The stormwater, there are stormwater concerns with the current plans for this neighborhood because there's so much concrete that they want to just lay down. There's hardly any green space in their plans. So that is a huge concern, especially with our river. And lastly, I went to both of the community meetings that they had about this area. And I talked to some of the residents that live there, and their families have lived there for over 100 years. And so how are they going to get them out? That's my concern. I mean, these people don't want to leave. They love their community. They've been there for a very long time, and they don't want these changes. So I really hope that the city honestly rejects this plan and they go back to doing what they should have done in the first place and get the community together, put some ideas on a whiteboard, and see what everybody can come up with that would, make everybody happy. Because not that we don't want growth. Of course, we need growth to move forward, but it doesn't have to be this. So that's what I recommend, and I hope that you guys consider that. Thank you.
Any other citizens to be heard? Okay, city staff report.
No reports.
How packed will the agenda be at next meeting?
You have a pretty large item on your June 19th meeting, if you remember, that was tabled.
Bristol.
And then there will be another small-scale amendment, I know of, on that night as well.
So we'll have the window over here too. City attorney,
I have no update, thank you.
tell us about the baby.
She'll be 2 on Saturday.
2? Good grief. I have no report. Do any of you have any reports? I'm glad that you managed to survive my my voice tonight. I only brought 2 cough drops. Next time I'll bring 3. I probably need to bring the whole package with Bristol here. Member Rogers.
We canceled the July 2nd, was it?
July 3rd.
July 3rd? Okay, right. But I myself will not be here next meeting. the
Okay.
19th.
Mr. Richardson, may I ask about putting on the agenda for your future meeting to talk about amending the order of your agenda? That's amending your bylaws. You want that on your next meeting to talk
I
about?
just want to discuss it. But if next meeting is going to be so overloaded, maybe we'll put it off to the next meeting, which is the second meeting in July.
Okay, so that's
Fine
what the
with
commission
me.
wants to do?
Any members have a report? Vice Chairman Aton, do you have a report?
I have a question,
Okay.
because I thought I recalled earlier someone saying that Bristol was a Live Local project, but yet it's apparently not, if we're hearing it.
We have an application with a letter requesting that their site plan be reviewed under the Live Local law. That was submitted to us in October 2023. We reviewed it and completed a first review of that site plan, issued a letter at the beginning of January. They have 180 days to respond to those comments. In addition to that, we have a small scale amendment application to rezone the property. So I believe what the applicant's trying to do is weigh their options.
Well, let's try not to pull the item at the very last minute. You know, if we find that a couple of days before the meeting, they're going to pull the item.
It's advertised, it'll be on your agenda.
Yeah, okay. Any other member? Okay, this meeting is adjourned at 8:53.